Morning, home, and someone tried to wake up. Someone who had a clear voice caressing the ear. He did not subside and asked to wake up, because it was already morning. The rays illuminated the room and the sleeping man who was hiding under the blanket, and could not understand whether he was still asleep or not. The voice asked me to wake up, because mom always said that. The one who does not get up on time is a bad child, and the father is a terrible dormouse. This phrase made the hero immediately open his eyes. Jumping up, he asked who called him dad. In front of him sat a charming girl with blonde hair and smiling asked her father to wake up. The sun had already risen on the street. The girl informed her sleepy father. The young man remembered that yesterday he suddenly had a daughter and it was not a dream. Looking at the child, our hero thought, tired and not getting enough sleep with bruises under his eyes. The daughter he had to take care of now. The girl looked at the surprised father and happily asked to go to breakfast with her. It was a little unexpected for the young man. He was already far from 20, and the young man was an ordinary graduate student. With black eyes and a cup of coffee, he cursed the professor. The hero thought that he always turned a blind eye to the professor's antics, but this time he crossed the line. Our hero dreamed only of a good job and a good salary. Sitting at the young man's desk, they called and there was a mother on the phone who asked her son if he had eaten, to which the young man was dissatisfied with her question and said that such an adult as he could provide for himself, and answering that he was eating well, the topic with food was over. A minute later, the mother started a conversation that was completed for the young man last time. He explained that he needed to get a degree to become a good specialist, because if he left now, then who would hire him? Huge companies did not hire just anyone. The young man got angry and spoke very loudly and thereby attracted the attention of other cafe visitors. Informing his mother that the young man was in a bad mood because of the professor, he packed his things and walked away. And his mother apparently wanted to finish him off with her conversations. Having put down a tray with coffee, our hero left the establishment. He was overcome by thoughts that his mother thought that the young man was not taken simply because he allegedly did not want it. He did not work in graduate school out of a great desire. Due to the high prices for education, our hero spent almost all of his parents' savings. But even they were not enough, the hero constantly took academic leave in one semester, then in another. He worked part-time as a waiter and delivered food to pay for his studies and finally, 6 years later, received a bachelor's degree. However, the professor explained that in order to work in a scientific and technical specialty, the young man also needed a master's degree. The professor did not insist on anything, but it would have been better, so we had to extend the training. As soon as our hero managed to finish his master's degree, he was told that he would be able to teach only after receiving a doctorate. Now the young man wanted to earn money as soon as possible in order to reduce his worries a little. If he can get a doctorate, as soon as he thought about it, he realized that while talking he got angry and yelled at his mother. The young man looked sadly at his phone and decided to call her back. The hero decided to apologize for his words, because who didn't want to live happily and earn well or have a strong family? Thanking his mom for worrying about him, he hung up. That's just in the position of a young man. When even the body was already bad, the young man considered it all an impossible dream that he could not fulfill. Let's talk with mom. And looking at the phone, our hero did not stop being surprised by his own antics. Then he dialed the number and offered to drink soju. Because it was Friday, perhaps the interlocutor was not busy, as he could keep our hero company. Waking up in the morning, the sun was shining in the young man's face and he, wrinkling his face, thought that yesterday he had a little too much alcohol. His head was splitting so much that the young man thought he would die right on his bed. While our hero was lying and thinking about his condition, someone was persistently knocking on the door. The young man thought that it was a peddler and after knocking a couple of times he would leave. But 5 minutes later the level of anger of our hero rose and he himself got out of bed, thinking about the immortal peddler. Getting out of bed and holding on to his aching head, the young man was impressed by the persistence of ringing 5 minutes in a row. Opening the door with anger, the young man shouted that he would not buy anything, because he did not trust those sellers who went home and offered something. In front of him stood a cute girl with a bag in her hands and looked at the guy in fright. As soon as he saw the girl, all the anger immediately went away, and the guy smiled and asked if she was messing with the doorbell. The weakness of the young man was everything cute. The guy asked what happened to her and whether the girl was too lightly dressed for such weather. The little girl stood and looked at the young man, silently. There were suitcases next to her. The young man, scratching his head and wondering what to do with the situation, thought that the girl might have been lost and he had to report it to the police. But then the little girl began to ask her father in a questioning voice, looking directly at our hero. Looking at the girl and hearing the word, "Dad," one question arose in the hero's head. The young man decided that the girl had lost her dad and decided to ask her about it, because maybe her uncle was like her father. But the girl replied that dad was dad, looking directly at our hero. But the young man began to tell the baby that he was not her dad. It seems that the girl did not know this yet because she was little. But to have a child, you had to be married, and the uncle was not married? The young man told the girl. The girl, continuing to look at our hero, replied that it was not so. And then the young man, holding his head, which was already boiling, decided to ask the main question. Who was the girl's mother then? The girl knew the answer to this question and said that her mother's name was Pi-yong. And then the young man understood, but it absolutely could not be, he thought to himself. He remembered the girl, the same Pi-yong, who lived in the first complex of Jugon. The hero began to remember what happened 7 years ago, and then he and his wife were on a hike and then slept together. But after that the girl suddenly disappeared. Now the girl in front of him was saying that she was his child. They were standing in the hallway, and the young man was holding his head remembering everything, and the girl was trying to pick up the phone. The little girl said that her mom told her to call when she got to dad and picked up the phone from the floor, which our hero had dropped earlier. Dialed mom's number, saying that she got there and nothing happened to her because she was her daughter. At this moment, the young man, leaning his head against the wall, tried to believe in the situation. After talking to her mother, she asked to give her father to the phone. And the girl handed the phone to her father, saying that it was her mother. The young man was shaking all over. Picking up the phone, he nervously answered the phone. On the other end, a female voice was telling Jaehoon that she hadn't heard him for a long time and was asking how he was doing. Shaking with understanding, the young man heard PN and asked if it was true that it was her. The girl answered positively, because who else besides her could it be? Then Jaehoon decided to ask what was going on here and where the child was from. He thought that the girl was joking with him. The girl watched the young man in surprise sitting on a suitcase behind him. A female voice on the phone answered that it was not a joke and Charon understood everything, and therefore the guy had to be careful with words and yes, it was their common child. The young man could not believe it, and the girl said that he could deny it as much as he wanted. But nothing would change, and if he did not believe the girl at all, he could go to the clinic and do a paternity test. The young man tried to find out then why Ina disappeared. What she had the circumstances, the girl answered. Then what circumstances were these? The young man tried to find out. The girl reported that she could not tell anything about it, but it was because of them that she had to leave Charon to her father. The girl had to live with her father for a while, and Ina was going to send money for the girl. The girl informed our hero by phone, saying that she had already taken care of all legal issues. The girl said that she could not talk for a long time and offered to call next time. The young man did not understand anything and asked the girl to wait. Unable to stand it, he wanted to swear, but then the girl began to repeat after him, and for the place of what the young man wanted to say, it turned out to be a real blessing the weather today. If our hero could, he would like to swear like that now, but there was no such opportunity. The girl, smiling, repeated after the Pope about the real grace. Since there was a child here, the young man had to refrain from swearing. Addressing the girl, Jaehoon asked if her name was Charon and offered to go inside. Taking her suitcase, the young man went first, and the happy girl, agreeing with her father's words, ran after him, taking the young man by the hand. The girl was glad that she was at her dad's house for the first time and thought it would be fun. Our hero was thinking completely the opposite, because a daughter suddenly appeared and everything suddenly became more complicated. The girl just looked at dad and smiled. The hero did not suspect at that moment how this meeting would turn his ordinary life around, and taking the girl by the hand, he led her home. And so the life of our hero with Charon began. Looking at the shelves in the house, the girl saw that everything was empty. Our hero, seeing that there was nothing on the shelves either, recalled his bachelor life. On weekdays he ate outside the house, on weekends he slept. In the evening the hero ordered himself something for dinner, so our hero did not know what to feed the child who appeared in the house at the moment. Jaehoon, grabbing his jacket, decided that it was necessary to go grocery shopping. Then the girl, rejoicing, said that since the young man was going to the store, she also wanted to. Getting dressed, the hero then offered to go to the store together. Here, looking at the child, our hero thought about the fact that it was January and a freezing wind, and all that the girl was wearing was a dress. The young man decided to ask if it was all the clothes that the girl had and whether she would freeze on the street in this form. Then the girl smiled and said that Charon would not freeze, although she said so. But the young man was still worried about her, and lifting the girl in his arms, he offered to go to her like that, wrapping her in his jacket. The girl was very warm, and the young man did not understand why she then came to him undressed. The girl, smiling, snuggled up to her dad and reported that she didn't care about the cold, but it was very nice in his jacket and everything suited her. Snuggling up to the girl, the young man felt warmth and love, but he still offered her to buy clothes. Our hero could not always wear it in a jacket. On the street, everyone was just talking about Jaehoon and Charon, who was sitting in her father's arms. At that moment our hero firmly decided to buy Charon a down jacket. Around people were touched by the girl and her beauty, but some wondered why the child was so lightly dressed in the middle of winter. Then the young man, holding the child, rushed to the children's clothing store that was across the street and decided to buy something warmer so as not to attract attention. Going into the store, the young man was thanked and asked to come again. Our hero could not understand why clothes for children could be more expensive than clothes for adults. The young man felt his card being emptied, looking at the check that was given to him in the store. The girl was very pleased that dad bought everything so much. When they left the store, the young man had such a distressed face, and the girl asked if her father was in pain because of such a strange facial expression. Jaehoon wanted to explain to the girl that she just misunderstood him. The young man, taking the cart, said that he no longer remembered the last time he cooked. Our hero did not even remember whether his rice cooking machine was still working. Looking at the cereal stand, the young man thought that he had almost no money left and maybe it was a good idea to take the cereal. Then Jaehoon decided to ask if Charon liked cereal, showing the girl a box of cereal. The girl, looking at them, said that she would like everything that dad would cook. Jaehoon breathed a sigh of relief that the girl would at least eat cereal, and put them in the cart. Then he realized that he felt sick. The sensations that he was experiencing were familiar. The young man felt pain and realized that he had eaten something wrong last night. After asking his daughter to stay in the store, our hero ran to the restroom. The girl proudly informed her father that she would look around the store for now. After running away and leaving their daughter alone in the store, everyone immediately paid attention to the beautiful and sweet Charon, who changed her face in a second and confidently walked in the other direction. Everyone, looking at the girl, thought about how beautiful she was and that most likely she was a model with such an appearance. Just as everyone was surprised by the moment that the child was walking alone in the store without parents. An adult man approached the girl and decided to ask where her parents were and if she was lost, to which the girl replied that her parent was in the bathroom. Then sitting down to the girl, the man stroked her on the head and asked if the girl needed help. But turning around and expressing anger, the girl showed with all her appearance and words that it was none of his business. The man was scared. Everyone was looking at the girl, who instantly turned from a cutie into an angry and cold doll. Everyone was looking in her direction and whispering that they saw a black lightning behind the girl. She sparkled behind the back of the sweet and beautiful Charon. Then the father returned, scratching his head, apologized to his daughter, because there were so many people, and he could not find her. Everyone was looking at them. Smiling, Charon said that she was a good girl and waited for dad. She also wanted to make sure that her father no longer had a stomach ache and he was in perfect order. Touching the young man's stomach, she said that Charon's hand was the doctor's hand and a green light appeared near her hands. With a sweet expression on her face, the girl asked dad's stomach to get better so that he felt good. The young man, looking at his daughter, who was running her hands over his stomach, smiling at his father, thought that it did not seem to him that his condition was improving and his stomach was not hurting so much. People passing by whispered that the young man was not like the girl's father, because they were not at all alike. Then someone asked the speaker to be quieter. Perhaps the girl went to her mother. Our hero looked in their direction. The girls, pretending not to notice the look of the young man, said that the girl's mother was very beautiful, and the young man apparently had a lot of money since he was with such a beauty. But another girl whispered to her friend that the young man did not look like a rich man and looked rather poor. Jaehoon was annoyed that he was being discussed by those with whom he was not even familiar, but they were right. The girl was not like her father. At the same time, our hero looked at the child that was smiling at him. After shopping and listening to gossip, our hero decided that it was time to go home. Standing at the cash register and paying off the girl who worked as a cashier, our hero was visited by various thoughts. For example, that the girl could not be his child at all, because as he had noticed earlier, they were not at all alike. In the evening, when he came home, the young man sat down at the computer and began to study various information. The fee for the test at a private research institution was very expensive, but it was the only way not to attract too much attention. Our hero decided, looking at the page on his computer. It seems that the hair is all that Jaehoon needed to give them for an examination to establish paternity. The young man thought that he could take a few strands while combing the girl. Deciding to do it tomorrow, he remembered that he had to warn the professor that he would be delayed due to personal circumstances, for which he would receive from him again. Then our hero's gaze fell on the sleeping Charon. The young man, looking at the girl, thought about Anu's words that this baby was their child. However, there was not a single feature in her that resembled the features of a young man. There was only one thought in the hero's head, that it was not his daughter. He looked sadly at the sleeping child, and our hero decided that he should know for sure as soon as he does a DNA test tomorrow. The next day, early in the morning, our hero went to a private clinic. Dumbfounded, he looked at the doctor smiling at the young man, who informed him that according to the results of the paternity test, both Kim Ji-hoon and Kim Charon were indeed related by blood. The girl was really the daughter of a young man who was shocked by this factor and stared in surprise at the doctor who showed him the results. The young man began to say that he and his daughter were not at all alike. Then the doctor explained to the young man that all the allelic genes coincided and therefore there was no reason for suspicion. The young man looked at the test results and heard only unrelated chatter in the background. Charon was indeed his daughter. After leaving the clinic, our hero did not know what to do. Ji-hoon was worried about whether Ji-hoon would be able to take care of the baby. Although Ina said she would help with expenses, the young man understood that he had his own life and he could not just change it. He had to go to the laboratory, and if he enrolled the girl in kindergarten, but then how could he pick her up? On the way home, our hero was overcome by all thoughts about his daughter and how his life had changed now, and that he had to think so much about someone. The experiences were only accumulating and there were already a whole bunch of them. With a sigh and a sad face, the young man went into the house, where Charon rushed to him with hugs and a smile, greeting his father. Hugging, the young man asked if everything was all right with Charon. The girl happily told her father that watching TV was fun for her. The newly made father began to teach the girl life and explained to her that if she sat very close to the screen, her eyes would deteriorate and she would have to wear glasses. The girl reported that she had good eyesight and asked her father not to worry about it. Looking at his daughter, the young man thought that his mood was much better when Charon was at home. Stroking the girl on the head, the young man said that he was going to take a shower and the girl could watch some more TV. Standing in the bathroom and brushing his teeth, the young man thought that everything had to get better somehow. Since there were such circumstances, then he could give up his degree and look for a job. In any case, the young man did not like the arrogant professor, so he decided that everything would be fine. Then brushing her teeth, the lock in the door clicked and the daughter reported that she also wanted to brush her teeth. And after asking the Pope for pasta, Charon handed the brush to her father, who obediently put the paste down. The young man looked at his daughter and thought about how cute she was. The girl was brushing her teeth. While Charon was brushing her teeth, her father decided to ask what she had been doing all day, and whether she was bored at home alone. The girl said that she was watching TV, and also told her father that she was bored without him, because the girl wanted to spend time with her dad. But smiling, the little girl asked her dad not to worry, she could wait while her father was at work. Ji-hoon patted his daughter on the head and decided to praise Charon for being such an adult. Then the girl said that her mother also often told her this, and she was smiling at dad. The young man then decided to ask where the girl had lived with her mother before, and Charon told the young man that it was far, far away to this place and added that she would like her father to live there too. The young man thought about her words, what the girl meant. Maybe, he thought, Charon was talking about abroad and suggested that he move there or somewhere else. But these are not the times of the Joseon dynasty, so immigration did not make much sense, the young man thought to himself. Our hero had a lot of questions for his daughter, and pouring water into a glass for the girl, he thought that he could not extract all the details from the child. Decided that he would learn everything gradually while he lived with Charon. Night came and it was time to go to bed. The father put his daughter in bed and lay down next to her on the pillow. The girl told her father about how happy she was that she would sleep with dad. The young man was surprised by such words, and then the girl asked her father if he was glad that his daughter had moved to him. The father replied to the girl that he was glad. She beamed with happiness and offered to give dad a massage, saying that she was good at it. The father turned over, and the girl began to massage with her small hands, asking if the father liked how the girl tried and whether it was pleasant to him. Our hero immediately relaxed after a long day. After a hot bath and massage, the young man felt that his eyes were closing. The girl, having finished doing the massage, asked her father if he was asleep, but the young man did not answer. He fell into a deep sleep. Looking at her father and smiling, the girl poked her little finger on his cheek. The father was really asleep. The girl wished her father peace of mind. The girl had energy in her hands and saying that her father was healthy and calm. She poured this energy into the sleeping Ji-hoon and then wished her father sweet dreams and went to bed herself. In the morning, our hero, as always, the alarm clock rang and the young man woke up and realized that it was already morning. Having decided to stretch a little, the young man felt that his neck did not hurt at all, and after pressing everywhere, he made sure that he felt great. Taking out breakfast from the shelf, the hero thought that he hadn't done anything special yesterday. After putting the girl's breakfast, he wanted to call her to the table, but Sharon had already got up and came to her father herself with a request to hug her. The young man took the girl in his arms and hugged her. She asked if the father felt refreshed this morning. Then the young man was surprised how the girl could find out about it. Then the baby told her dad that it was all thanks to Sharon's massage and proudly hugged her father. Our hero, stroking his daughter on the head, said that his health was wonderful thanks to the girl. They hugged, and the young man confessed to the girl that he felt stronger because of his baby, because he had only her, Sharon. The girl, rejoicing at her father's reaction, told him that she would do a massage every day. Jaehoon, agreeing with his daughter, asked her to have breakfast, because she was probably hungry, and a happy girl agreed with her father. The phone was vibrating on the table, and the young man, looking at it, wanted to find out who was calling him. The inscription "Mom" appeared on the phone, and then our hero realized that he had not told anyone about what had happened to him. He had completely lost it from his head. The young man had to tell his parents that they had a granddaughter, because it was still very difficult for the guy to lie to his parents in everything. There was a caller on the phone, and the young man could not decide whether he should have picked up the phone or not. Deciding to calm down, the young man wanted to pick up the phone and answer the call as if nothing had happened. Repeating this to himself as naturally as possible, the young man picked up the phone and greeted his mother. The young man's voice sounded strange at the same time, because he was nervous, and his mother noticed it. She wondered if anything had happened because the young man's voice sounded very strange. Then the guy decided to ask his parents and then answer himself, while his daughter was eating and looking at the young man. He also asked his parents if they had had breakfast, and then, in response to his mother's question, he almost blabbed about Sharon that she had breakfast with him. The young man said that he was going to eat cereal, and thereby reassured his mother that he ate at least cereal. The young man believed that he ate normally, and informed his mother about it. Mom informed the young man that she was going to call him yesterday. The guy's hand that was scratching the back of his head froze, and the mother reported that she had looked at several places for the young man where he could earn extra money. And then our hero told his mother that he had already made a decision. The young man decided that he would not apply for a doctorate, but would simply try to get a job after this year. The hero's mother was delighted with her son's news and asked if he would come to them for the new year. The young man looked at Sharon and informed his mother that he would come for the new year, and before him, too. Then the interested mother asked when her son was going to visit them so that she could cook what he likes. The young man told his mother that he was going to visit them next week. Wishing a good day, Mom said goodbye to the young man, and our hero meanwhile exhaled. Our sad hero decided to introduce Sharon to his parents next week. They are probably so happy that the young man reported that he was going to get a normal job. Jaehoon was worried about whether he had to tell them other bad news in his opinion. Sharon, meanwhile, rushed into her father's arms, thereby surprising the young man. The young man did not understand that the girl had a rush of tenderness and asked about it. The little girl replied that her father looked very unhappy, and therefore she also felt sad. Then our hero reported that he was fine and the girl had nothing to worry about. The girl with tears in her eyes told her father that he could tell Sharon everything if something bothered him, and then Sharon would save her father from all worries. The young man promised that he would tell Sharon everything if something bothered him and invited the girl to return to the table and finish their breakfast. The flakes seemed very tasty for the girl because she ate them together with her father. The young man realized that, looking at the laughing Sharon, he felt that all the experiences somehow disappeared in an instant. The girl was smiling and eating her cereal. The young man wanted time to stop and all his worries to go away forever. When he came to study, he was met by a classmate who wondered where the circles under Jaehoon's eyes had gone. Maybe the young man secretly went to a dermatologist or something like that. Our hero only nervously scratched his cheek and looked at his friend, answering that he did not know what the secret was. Our hero did not attach much importance to the absence of pain in his neck, which had been hurting him constantly earlier when he woke up. But the bags under his eyes that he had had since he started working in the laboratory also disappeared. The young man looked at himself in the mirror all morning, watching the changes in his face. Standing next to his classmate, our hero wondered if it could be because of his daughter's massage, but from a scientific point of view it was impossible. While our hero was thinking about his own, the young man next to him, also looking at Jihna, told him that not so long ago the professor was looking for him. When asked why the professor was looking for a hero, the friend could not answer, and he also informed our hero that the professor, judging by his facial expression, was in a terrible mood, and therefore a friend warned his Hyung to be careful with the professor. Realizing that the friend's story was not the most impressive, our hero thanked him for the fact that the young man shared information with him and went about his business waving his hand. After knocking on the door, the young man informed the professor that he had heard that he was looking for him. Immediately sheets of paper flew into our hero's face, and the professor, shouting at Jahoon, asked why he brought him the writing, thinking that it was a good essay. The young man picked up the signatures, and the professor pointed out to him that the young man wrote therefore, and apparently wanted to make his debut as a poet, and he should have prescribed the concept in more detail and accurately. The young man was apologizing to the professor. The young man was on his knees and collecting papers while the professor was standing over him and looking at the professor. He was talking about the cute face of our hero, who obviously slept well after writing such a bad essay. The young man was apologizing to the professor again. Then the professor continued to put pressure on the young man, asking him what would happen if he recommended the young man to a familiar company. Even his student did not meet the requirements and thereby disgraced his professor, he informed him. The young man was already almost 30, and the professor did not understand why he was not able to behave like a human being here. Did he no longer need his recommendations anymore? The man of our hero asked. The young man stood, and already from the words of the professor his hands began to twitch. Didn't he know how much easier it would be to find a job in this industry if the professor said just a few words about the young man? Because his recommendations solved the problem of competition and employment. All this time, the young man continued to listen to him, and at some point the chatter no longer sounded in his ears, but was somewhere in the distance. Our hero was furious with the situation, because yesterday he told him that it was a good approach. Every time the professor was in a bad mood, he found fault with every little thing for no reason, and if he has nothing more to say, he tries to put pressure on employment problems. Having finished his tirade, the professor demanded to redo everything immediately. After that, taking the young man by the shoulder, he asked if he had decided about a doctorate. The young man sadly replied that he had not. It would be better to do technical research with a doctorate, the professor said, and asked the young man to think about it and told him that he was free. The young man obeyed the professor and left. After leaving the office, the friend who had previously spoken to our hero asked if Hyun was okay. The young man only turned his head in response. Then a friend, running after the guy, asked him not to get upset because the professor constantly behaved like this. The young man thanked his friend for his words. Sitting down at his chair, Jahoon thought that all this was very stressful for him. He would like to ruin everything if he could, and looking at the phone, he thought that the best way out might have been to make a big scandal and just quit. Then unlocking the phone, he saw a photo with his daughter, which was taken by Shireen herself. This touched our hero, and he looked at his cute baby. Looking at the photo with the girl, where she was in the foreground, our hero broke into a smile and felt better. Exhaling, he decided that he had only 6 months left to hold out and then he would quit. Until that moment, he decided that he would pretend to be a vegetable. The young man did not want to do something that he could find fault with later. He decided to live as if he did not exist. Clicking on the keyboard and humming a melody on, the hero smiled. Countless Sunbi had done this before him, and he decided that he was no worse than them and therefore could cope with this task. After sitting at the computer and saddling all the edits that the professor needed, our hero thought that it was done perfectly, even all the corrections. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, the young man knew that now he had to go to take care of Charon. Addressing Yerim, the guy asked if she accidentally knew where the professor was now. The girl, turning around, said that she did not know, and how could she know where the professor could be. The young man apologized for disturbing the girl, and she quickly left the office. Then the hero, looking after her, decided that the girl had a lot of stress, since she was responding so aggressively. It seemed to the young man that lately the girl was getting more and more nervous. Opening the door and leaving the office, the professor was waiting for her, calling the girl his Aram, from which the girl shuddered. The professor found out where the girl was in such a hurry and asked not to forget the girl to look at him later before leaving. Professor Yerim asked, smiling. She just looked at him askance and said nothing. Evening came, and my father returned home, informing Charon about it. The girl, as always, immediately ran to her father in his arms, and a caring young man asked if the girl had dinner without him, hugging his daughter and stroking her head. The girl told her dad that for dinner she warmed up rice and ate it. Looking at the table, the young man saw only a plate of rice and some canned food. This made him think that the girl could not finish eating in this way. Then the mother, when she sees her emaciated daughter, would deal with him in a certain way. These thoughts frightened the young man, And the daughter looked at the frightened father uncomprehendingly, and deciding that this would not do, he decided to dial the phone number. And our hero has not even thought about how to explain everything to his parents, but it seems he had no choice. The young man could not constantly leave his daughter alone. And with shaking hands, he decided to dial his mother's number in order to confess to her what he had not had time to do before. The next day, morning, a phone call and a voice on the phone did not understand why the young man could be late due to family circumstances. Shouting, the voice asked why. The young man considered the laboratory an amusement park. Our hero only listened with his eyes closed to a portion of a nervous scream that poured out on him again. There was a professor on the wire who suggested that the young man simply refuse to get a degree. The young man, after listening to all this, told his professor that he was sorry and he would try to come as soon as everything was sorted out quickly. The professor on the other end of the line said that he would personally check what time the young man would come to work. Charon, dressed in a winter jacket, stood nearby and looked at her father. Jihoon was thinking about a project that was already at the final stage and there were no accidents on this occasion. But the professor was still yelling at him and it was very exhausting for the young man. The girl, hearing her father's thoughts aloud, asked why someone was shouting at her father. Then our hero explained to the baby that it was a professor who was teaching him. But the young man made a small mistake. The girl wondered what mistake her father could have made, and the young man asked her not to worry about it. Standing at the traffic light, our hero thought that he had not yet decided how to explain everything to his parents. Maybe they would be scared, but they would not throw him and his daughter out. He thought that in the end he could rely on them. The girl was standing next to her and was angry at the professor who was bothering her father. Having come to visit the young man's parents, the girl greeted her grandparents with a smile and introduced herself as Kim Charon. The boy's parents looked at the girl in horror and did not understand how they had to react. The young man, gathering all his courage, confirmed the words of his daughter that it really was their granddaughter. The mother immediately grabbed the wall, and the father tried to support her, pointing his finger at the girl. He asked if it was really their son's daughter. Jihoon said that he found out about this news himself only 2 days ago, when Ina called him to tell him that Jihoon now has a daughter. Then the parents remembered Ina, with whom the young man met in high school. He confirmed their words, and said that when they were on a trip, that's when everything happened that led to the birth of their daughter. Then the parents concluded that Charon was a child conceived on a trip and Ina had been raising her all this time by herself. The young man told this in case his parents did not believe him. The father began to attack his son. It was a blatantly incomprehensible situation for him, where the hero, just listening to the girl after her story, took the child, believing that she was really his daughter. Since all this was true, then the young man had to come with her. Then why did the young man come alone? Ina also told the young man that she has some problems, and our hero has not called the girl since that day. But the young man took a paternity test with him and showed his father, saying that the girl really was his daughter. The father asked to take the child away for something to eat, because the girl looked incomprehensibly at the whole situation. The father wanted to talk to his son alone. Then the father, opening the door to the room, asked his son to follow him. The young man obediently followed his father, and his mother took the girl to breakfast. Calling herself a grandmother, the girl immediately agreed. The father, left alone with his son, asked what he was planning to do now. The young man, of course, planned to raise a girl, because she is his daughter. The father, of course, knew that this was how it was supposed to be, but he asked what the young man would do with it. The girl didn't pick up the phone. The father asked how the girl's name sounded correctly and decided to ask his son if he had brought her to her parents because of the weekend. The young man was not going to the gate and told his father that it was for this reason that he brought his daughter, because he did not have the opportunity to look after the girl while he was in the laboratory. Also, the young man could not feed the child properly, which was very frustrating for the young father. After standing in silence for a minute, the young man was worried about sharing his thoughts with his father. It would be logical if he was kicked out, given that he brought a child who came from nowhere. Jihoon hadn't even got a job yet and couldn't understand at all what he was doing with his life. The father thought it was right. Now was the stage when the young man was worried, and it was not surprising the father answered. The young man's dad also promised that he would help look after his daughter, but it would be better if her mother joined this process as soon as possible. Parents should raise a child together. If a young man is not going to refuse to be hired, then he should live with his mother and raise his daughter. The young man was happy and asked his father if he would accept Charon as his granddaughter. The father looked at the young man and the answer to his question seemed obvious to the father, and he did it not for the sake of his son, but for the sake of Charon. The young man was overjoyed and bowed to his father and thanked him for his help. The father asked the young man not to relax, thinking that everything was decided, Because of him now this tormented the idea of spending money on the child that he was saving for his son's wedding. The young man was really sorry that everything had turned out this way. The father reassured his son that it was a joke and the young man could not worry. But if the father continues to worry about it, then the young man could just get married later and return the money back. Our hero smiled and thanked his dad. Charon was recognized as a granddaughter. While getting dressed, Jahoon reported that he would return in the evening and asked his daughter to obey her grandparents, and on weekends she and her father would go to settle somewhere. The girl was obedient and was glad that her father took her somewhere on the weekend, and she asked me to promise the young man on the little finger that he would keep his word. Father and daughter shook each other's little fingers. It was a promise. The father and mother looked at their son, and the happy girl waved goodbye to her father. Today, the young man's steps seemed lighter to him than in those days before when he went to work. The young man ran to work and thought that he was worried that he could not tell his daughter food. But now he could breathe a sigh of relief. It would be the first weekend with Charon, so Dad decided he needed to go to some nice place. The moment that the young man was most worried about was resolved. The young man looked at the phone and chose where they could go with their daughter. There were options for Everland or Lot's World, thinking that the first option had more interesting things and there was more to see. Charon is now truly part of the family. The young man reasoned that before the appearance of his daughter, his weekends existed only to relax at home. And now, looking at the clear sky, our hero smiled and thought that he was looking forward to this weekend. But that evening at work he was informed about the hike. The project was almost completed, which meant that after the New Year's party, it was possible to go camping for the weekend. The staff suggested. Our hero was surprised by this and others did not understand why. The professor suggested this and asked if the young man had plans for the weekend or some family matters, saying that the young man had already taken a day off this week and that he had to solve his problems. The young man, looking nervously at his professor, reported that he already had plans for this weekend. The professor looked at the young man in surprise. Then the young man had to agree that he would go, since he had solved all family matters, he said to the professor through his teeth. The latter, smiling, patted the young man by the shoulders, expecting just such an answer. It was necessary to go on a hike to restore energy. Yerim and Changsu were next to the professor and our hero and also received a question about the trip. Everyone was unhappy, but everyone agreed to go. The professor saw that everyone agreed and, leaving, said that he would be offended if someone spoiled his holiday. Everyone was silently looking in his direction. Everyone had their own plans. Someone was going to watch a movie at the end of the week. Someone was just annoyed, because not everyone as a professor spent time at home on weekends. Like him, it was necessary to ask the guys first, as they thought, if they had any plans at all. All the laboratories were furious because of the changeable mood of the professor, but no one was ready to directly resist him. Professor Chan held the future professions of the employees in his hands. No one could do anything about the fact that he needed to relax and go camping. The young man, looking sadly at the phone, thought that he would have to postpone going to the amusement park until next weekend. No one liked the situation that was developing, but the only thing the guys could do was just put up with it. It was so disappointing that it was impossible to refuse such events. Charon would be very upset, his father thought. The young man explained to the girl, already in the evening, that he would not be able to go with her this weekend. While the girl silently looked at her father, he tried to explain to her that the two of them would be able to get there next week and this time for real, because our hero had already booked tickets. The girl stretched out her arms to her father and asked him to hug her. Her father dutifully agreed to her request. The young man asked his daughter if she was upset, but the girl, hugging her father, said that everything was fine with her. It seemed to the young man that the girl did not want to go, but Charon reported that she felt as if her father had to do it and it upset her. Then the hero, looking at his daughter, said that he was fine and did not want the girl to worry about him. It was a good opportunity to practice a little. The daughter was surprised to ask if Dad was telling the truth. Charon decided to ask her father that they were going to the mountains because of the uncle who called her father in the morning. The father told the girl that it was his professor and they had just finished the project, so to celebrate its completion, the professor wanted to go camping with everyone. The girl, hugging her father, asked him to come back healthy and that he would not get hurt anywhere. The young man assured his daughter that everything would be fine with him and it was a safe mountain where they were going. He was very pleased that the girl was worried about her father. Charon, hugging her father, flashed her eyes and was angry. In the evening, the young man came out after a shower and looked at the sleeping girl. Today Charon rode the subway and bus for more than an hour. Probably she was tired, our hero thought to himself. The girl was wrapped in a blanket and only her hair was visible. The young man regretted that he could not talk to Charon before going to bed, but there was nothing he could do about it. It was already too late when our hero took her away from her parents. Jihoon climbed into bed and thought that he had just arrived home, went to the shower, and it was already 1 o'clock in the morning on the clock. Sleepy, he thought that if it was only today, then it's okay. But if it continues every day, then transport tickets will cost him more. And the young man also wanted to sort out the kindergarten and decided to leave this issue until tomorrow. At that moment he fell asleep. The little girl, opening her eyes, looked at her father, making sure that he had definitely fallen asleep. She used her magical powers again and wanted to help her father fall into a deep and peaceful sleep. While she was conjuring over him, the young man smiled and the girl, noticing this, was very happy. And now that her father was definitely asleep, she wanted to teach the professor a lesson. Using her power, the little girl climbed into her father's head to read his memories. Professor Chang Dongho's name. He was an old boomer who pretended to be cute, but was actually a sly fox. The girl saw everything that he did in relation to her father. In addition, he was a bad person who pretended to be weak in front of those who are stronger, and stronger in front of those who are weaker. Then the girl remembered the words of her mother, who said that her daughter, having met a two-faced man who oppressed others, could teach him a lesson. However, the girl could not interfere with the causes and consequences when teaching a lesson to this person. A girl could make a man be eaten up by his own vices. Hovering over the bed where her father was sleeping and using her power, she asked where Chang Dongho was now. Having found the professor, she said goodbye to her father out loud and told the sleeping Jian that she would return after teaching the bad uncle how to behave, and with these words the girl disappeared. Once in the room illuminated by moonlight, Charon hovered over the professor's bed and looked at him. It was the same man Chang Dongho who was sleeping sweetly in his bed and did not suspect anything. Then the girl decided to see what sins this man had committed, and, waving her hand, climbed into his head. There were a lot of sins, and the girl wondered what kind of sin she should make bear fruit. After looking at the energy of light, she decided that it was there that she saw what should bring the greatest effect. It was a little annoying that she had to take care of another person, but if it was Dad's pleasure, then she was ready to do it. And she asked her energy to merge with Chang Dongho and another person. Now sin will reach its limit and will soon explode. When the explosion happens, it will hurt a little, but it was better than leaving it to completely fester in the future. And as she was about to leave, the girl thought that she would come to check on the professor a little later. Around the man's body was the energy that the girl brought with her. Mom told her to check people after such manipulations. Returning home, the girl crawled under the covers into bed, where our unsuspecting protagonist was sleeping peacefully. The daughter informed her father that she had returned. And I thought that my father would be really surprised as soon as he found out, although for some time the young man would not guess that his daughter had done it. But when she found out, the girl decided that she would say that it was a surprise and wished good night, fell asleep. Our hero brought his daughter to his grandparents and asked her to play enough. Grandma and Grandpa looked at the father and daughter saying goodbye. The young man hugged the girl, and then putting her asked to have fun. Charon said that she was obedient, and Grandma said that Charon was so wonderful and sweet that the young man did not need to worry about his daughter. The young man was very happy and smiling, looking at his parents and daughter. Still, it was very nice when the child was praised in front of the parent. The young man felt so happy when Charon was complimented. The mountains were dangerous in winter, and everyone asked the young man to be careful, but he left after saying goodbye. It was not at all the weekend that our hero had hoped for. The sad life of a graduate student tied to his professor. Staggering, our hero went his own way and thought about his sad life and the professor, who would again communicate with him in an inappropriate way, and that our hero would have to spend his weekend with him. The professor was collected and thanked everyone for coming so early on his day off. Everyone stood and listened to the professor. Chang Dongho had already offered to enjoy the coolness of the mountain air and show the unity of the members of the laboratory, and now it was necessary to start hiking. One young man, unable to stand it, said after the professor that if he liked it so much, then he could not drag the students with him. Our hero asked his friend to be quiet so that they would not be heard. There were a lot of people and there was not a single breath of cool breeze. It became very stuffy from so many people. Our hero, agreeing with his friend, remembered that they said that the tourism season was now in full swing. Today's hike was quite difficult, and a friend complained to our hero how difficult it was. While Jihoon believed that it was hard to eat, it was necessary to chat less while they were climbing the mountain. Our hero walked calmly and his friend was surprised that Jihoon was not tired at all. The young man decided to ask if his friend had been training lately without him. The schedule of both coincided, and our hero asked his friend how he could train without him. A friend could not leave our hero alone and asked if the young man had eaten healthy food alone, because his face had recently become prettier, thereby angering our hero, because he did not do anything like what his friend said. It seemed suspicious to the young man that Jaehoon had changed so dramatically. Then our hero really thought. His body felt light lately, rubbing his neck. He thought that when he woke up earlier, his body ached everywhere. But after the appearance of Charon, the hero felt much better. A picture of his daughter meeting him popped up in his head. Every time Professor Chan took out our hero, he started thinking about Charon and felt like he had his strength back. He wanted to see Charon as soon as possible, and was wondering if his daughter had eaten well. A colleague nearby cursed everything and looked at our hero, who was walking calmly in his thoughts. The friend was disappointed in the young man. He was sure that our hero was hiding something from him, although they had always been together before, and now the young man often smiles to himself. It must be, and without finishing, Jaehoon interrupted his friend and asked him to understand him correctly, because everything was completely wrong. Then the young man asked and said that Jinwoo was not in shape before and that last year he was not like that. During this year alone the guy's stomach grew. Then our hero offered a friend to study at least sometimes, because he was only in his 20s. A friend was sitting on a bench and breathing heavily, telling Jin that the young man was strange. A laboratory rat with such endurance? This is a real scam. The young man replied that he had been like that since birth. Then they heard the professor asking Yerim if the girl was tired and asked her to take her time and get up carefully. But she was silent in response. The young man asked our hero if it seemed strange to him that Yerim's face had become more gloomy lately. Our hero also considered and asked a friend if he knew something. After last year's New Year's party, the girl became like this. Perhaps then she had some problems with the professor. Then the question arose, what could have happened that the girl could have problems with the professor? Then a friend reminded the hero that Nuna was absent after the corporate party, and didn't our young man remember how it all ended that day? The hero recalled that since then the girl was a little unfriendly. Then the young men began to discuss this topic more deeply while sitting on a bench for a break. It was strange that, after leaving the girl, the professor did not say anything, because her departure was unreasonable. Now, if Hyun or a young man had done such a thing, they would have been immediately scolded for such an attitude. Jaehoon agreed with his friend's words. Most likely, the girl got away with everything, because it was somehow connected with him. That's why Chan yelled at the guys not to worry when they asked about Nuna. Jaehoon asked the guy to watch his tongue, because if the professor heard their conversation, the young man would be doomed, because he remembered every strange thing. Then the friend said he would ask Hyun to check it out. Jaehoon, thinking that his friend had gone crazy, asked if he remembered how much he already owed him and ran after the guy running away from him, who shouted that it was all a joke. Stopping at a cafe, everyone decided to drink to the victory of the audience. Now everyone had to empty their raised glasses in one gulp. Drinking after the hike was easy, and the professor decided to make sure of this by asking the students. Yerim sat with a sad face and was silent. The professor sat down next to the girl and asked her to drink with everyone, thereby annoying her. Chang Do-hong was so disgusting that she felt sick, but I had to agree. The girl, holding a glass, asked the professor if he had forgotten his promise. Then the professor, looking at the girl, tried to understand what she was talking about. With an enraged look, she looked at him and he immediately remembered, just decided to make fun of the girl. But waving it off, he said that he remembered everything. Grabbing the girl by the hand, he told her that he would find a place so that she could study abroad and make her a professor upon her return. At the same time, he smiled and looked at the girl. Yerim was shaking from the situation and the professor's behavior. She knew that he had to keep this promise. The girl said that she would have to take measures. The professor thought she was threatening him, but the girl said that was not the case. After all, the professor himself told her that he would block the way if she told about it. Thinking about how disgusting Cha Do-hun was, he asked to keep himself in hand because she had to. But today she couldn't cope with her emotions. The professor asked the girl to be honest with him. He would keep his promise and therefore she should not hide anything from him. And the girl said she would be honest now. This reaction surprised him very much. Our little Charon stood and controlled her energy in her hands, asking to be patient a little, even if it was very hard. It will hurt at first, but everything will get better soon. The next day our hero found out that the professor had been summoned to the prosecutor's office. And immediately there was a question for what? Then a friend told me that after a hike that took place on the weekend, Jang Dongho behaved impermissibly towards Yerim Nuna. The young man, hearing this statement, was insanely surprised, because he would never have thought of such a thing. The young man considered the professor one of those who knows the limits of what is permissible, but still the professor violated them. That's why Yerim was so nervous. The young man hoped that everything was fine with the girl. A friend interrupted Jahoon's thoughts and told the young man that they needed to report to me on the completion of the project. Then our hero suddenly remembered about the project. The hero believed that the report would no longer be needed, because the Hatch company gave them the project only because of the professor, and now there was no point in finishing it. The friend was also worried, because he had spent so many nights on the project and now they didn't know what the wallpaper guys had to do. Even if Professor Chan did not contribute to the study, he was the one who was assigned this project. Without a supervisor, all the work will go to waste. After looking at the mood of the guys, which was completely spoiled, the young man was upset. Then a guy came up to him and said that the dean was looking for a young man. Our hero was certainly surprised, but no one knew why he was called and the young man had to go. Having come to the dean, the young man was asked if he had heard about Professor Chan. The young man answered positively to the question, because before coming to the dean's office, he was told about what had happened to the professor. A man sitting in an armchair and sipping coffee told the young man that as far as he knew, the current project carried out by the young man's team was almost completed. Our hero told the dean that it only remained to organize a presentation for the project. But the professor interrupted the dean without finishing the young man with a request to finish everything to the end and present his project. The answer shocked our hero. Then the man asked if Jahoon was the senior in the laboratory, and since the professor finished very badly, now the young man had to take responsibility and complete the work. It couldn't be that the dean didn't know that a commercial company had ordered an industrial project from the university, the young man thought. Their opponents also fought for the first place in the financial world. The young man wanted to object, but the dean reported that he had contacted Hatch for their sake and asked to report to him when the young man's team was finished. The dean also asked not to worry and to do everything in the best way. As always, our hero was already barely standing on his feet because of nerves and only agreed with him. Standing in front of his classmates, the young man reported that the dean wanted our hero to defend the results of the project and finish it. All the guys were surprised and asked if it was true. Because the rector's election was coming soon, the hero's friend thought that the dean wanted to present the project under his own name and thereby strengthen your reputation. Everyone thought together, it made sense, and everyone nodded to each other. Since the dean undoubtedly wanted to take the position of rector, our hero could understand his actions. And our hero thought about the fact that he was required to simply state everything well. A friend asked if our hero could do everything without complaints, and if he started to stutter, the dean would not let him get away with it, so he had to make sure that he took medication. The young man fell down and told Hyun that he couldn't just hit him to make fun of him. Our hero took the rest of the staff away smiling sweetly and offered the guys to finish the project. They had wasted the whole morning and now their schedule was pretty tight. Since the report was due to be submitted tomorrow, they needed to work hard. Jahoon, full of enthusiasm, wanted to end this. In the evening, our hero took his daughter and asked if she had a good day and whether she obeyed her grandparents. The girl said that she was obedient and ate a lot of delicious food. Dad was very happy and wanted to apologize to the girl for being late. They walked down the street and held hands. The daughter happily replied that Sharon understood everything, because her father was working. Dad explained to the girl that tomorrow he had to go to a big company called Hatch, so he had to work late to finish everything. The girl asked what our hero would do there. Then the father explained to the girl that he would present the work he was doing there. Sharon had to cheer for her father so that he could do well. The girl smiled and agreed. When our hero came home, he fell asleep, and his daughter thought, what was she supposed to do? Then she used magic jars for her father to make him feel confident in tomorrow's presentation. After using everything, the girl decided that one of them should definitely help her father. I added a little knowledge, confidence, and even charm. It will also not be superfluous, the girl thought. But by mistake I added too much, and I wondered if everything would be fine with my father after that. The father was sleeping peacefully, and the girl, having finished pouring all her magic jars into him, wished him good night, and, satisfied with her work, also climbed into bed under the blanket to Dad and hoped that her mistake would not harm her father, but only help even more, because what could have happened, Sharon thought. In the morning, the father asked the girl how he looked, because he had not worn anything like this for a long time and therefore felt awkward. The girl praised her father, saying that he looked simply inimitable and smiled at him with her charming smile. And the young man was ready, even though he was thinking in his head that he was still so nervous yesterday. But now he was full of confidence that he could do anything today. Our hero was standing in a gorgeous black suit, which suited him very well. standing in front of the company building. The young man thought that he was already here, but for the first time he came here alone and therefore was very nervous. Standing in front of the doors of the building, he thought that it was worth listening to chants and taking a sedative. But when he calmed down, he decided that he just had to perform well. Previously, he had seen Chief Young perform and therefore everything should have been fine. Our hero, straightening his tie and holding onto his bag, went into the building. Remembering his smiling daughter, who believed in her father, he felt better, and since Charon believed in him, Jihoon decided that he would hold on confidently and give his best at today's presentation 100%. The hero was met by a girl who said that the boss would be there soon. The girl also explained that the boss would like to come in person and therefore the young man had some time to prepare before his arrival. Jihoon, hearing what the girl told him, was taken aback and stood looking at her questioningly. Jihoon, smiling nervously, told the girl that all this was nothing, and he had prepared well, so there was no need to prepare. Having asked the girl to print out the materials from the flash card, he handed it to the girl. The same one saw how the hero was shaking and wondered if everything was all right with him. The young man was out of order and in his heart he was crying why exactly the boss was going to come today. Our hero decided that he was definitely doomed. We should still drink a sedative, our hero thought, and regretted that he did not do it from the very beginning, thinking that he was waiting for a failure, and even in the morning he had some strange confidence. Standing and sorting out his materials for the presentation, our hero shed tears and thought that if the boss came, then so would everyone else, which means if our hero screwed up, then his life would be ruined. Then his thoughts were interrupted by the young man, seeing that Jihoon was standing here. It was the boss Young, and our hero heard from the boss that in such a difficult time, our hero wanted to ask what he meant. But the young man said that he would tell later. The fighting spirit was broken even before it all started, our hero thought. It also seemed to him that he did not remember anything that he had to do. Meanwhile, the employees were sitting in their seats while our hero cursed everything in the world and worried about the upcoming presentation. People started coming to the hall, and our hero only thought that it was unnerving for the young man to perform in front of someone whom even Professor Chan had never seen before. Here some man, sitting in a chair looking at our hero with a dissatisfied look, firmly said that he could start his presentation. The man's aura was even more powerful than the one our hero saw on the news. Our hero had such a feeling that he would be kicked out if he stuttered a little. And thinking to himself what will happen, our hero decided to start the performance by informing everyone present in the hall, thereby drawing attention to himself. After starting his speech and then finishing it and thanking everyone for listening to him, our hero finished. The conference room was very quiet, no one said anything and only looked at the young man. Then our hero thought that he had screwed up. He tried to remember what mistakes he had made, but he couldn't remember what he had said at all. Whatever happened, Jihoon hoped it would end soon. The man only asked the young man to introduce himself, then Jihoon started talking about the name of the project. But the man was not asking about the name of the project, because he was not blind and was able to read from the slide. He wanted to know about something else, namely the name of the presenter. Jihoon was scared. He didn't understand why the man asked him his name and then introduced himself. The man asked Kim Jihoon to tell about any achievements and failures of the project. The young man said that 95% of the indicators achieved based on the set goal could be called successful. What were the main aspects that led to the final result? The young man told about 3 main ones. The first one was a reaction to room temperature. As he just started, the man evaluating him smiled, and our hero noticed it. The young man beamed and thought that if the man smiled, then it was a good moment. At that, he stood up with the words that he only needed to hear this moment. And the boss left, everyone said goodbye to him, and our hero stood, literally crumbling into 1,000 small fragments from what was happening, which shocked him. Jihoon thought it was a failure and he was gone. Looking at what was happening, the young man thought that the boss's smile meant something good, but perhaps it was a deceptive hope. He just took it and left like that. Our hero thought he was finished. Then someone called him. It was the rest of the staff, praising the young man for his performance. They told the guy that they had a good opinion and most likely the boss too. The young man was not encouraged by the words of his boss's colleague, because he left, but looking at the other employees who remained in their places, he noticed that everyone was in a good mood. The reactions were so different that the young man was completely confused and did not understand whether it was good or bad. One of the employees said that they had to introduce a new technology based on the results of the study as soon as possible. If they act in accordance with the documentation, they will be able to beat competitors in terms of price. In this case, how will they return the invested funds? The woman, looking at her colleague, asked if he just wanted to throw the money away. First of all, they needed to reimburse the costs, and the costs at the moment were not so important. One employee told a colleague, and they quarreled among themselves about future plans. Our hero, watching this, thought that the employees were arguing about the internal affairs of the company, and did not understand whether he could be present at this. But only our hero thought about it, as a man wanted to know the opinion of the presenter on this issue, what he thought about it, and the young man was surprised that his opinion was decided to ask. Here the man apologized to the young man, scratching his head guiltily. Because Jaehoon was not their employee, he just forgot about it, because the young man was standing among them and looked like an employee of the company. The guy sitting next to me was of the same opinion. The nervous look of the young man reminded them of the times when they were at a performance and were new employees of the company. Someone remembered their first presentation in front of the boss. Now this employee was on good terms with him because he had known him for a long time. Jaehoon thought to himself about what it meant that he didn't look like a kitten and was grateful that the company's employees liked him. One of the employees suggested to the boss Jan to escort the guest because he was in charge here, because everyone present. So, forced the young man to stand for too long, got up and, agreeing with the woman, decided to escort our hero, who was too exhausted by the presentation and glad that he could finally leave. The boss Yang decided to calm the young man down and said that the young man was really shaking. But Jan liked everything. The young man performed well in front of the boss, did not even stutter too much. Yang thought Jaehoon was reserved, but his presentation made the boss change his mind. The young man thanked for the excellent words, but then Jan stunned the guy by saying that the company decided to abandon this project. The young man was crushed, because it turned out that everything they said before was just empty compliments, why he was so unlucky, and what kind of injustice society was. Yang asked Jaehoon not to be upset, saying that everything went well. The young man looked at the boss uncomprehendingly, and then the boss Yang mentioned about the words he had previously said before the presentation. The company was going to move its activities to the school. Therefore, boss was so angry that he came in person. But Chief Yang didn't want to talk about it anymore and told the young man everything he could, patting him on the shoulders. The guy looked at Ian blankly. In addition to all the boring conversations, Jan wanted to ask our hero something. Whether Jaehoon had plans to study abroad. The young man replied that at the moment he had no such plans. Then Yan, holding out his hand to the young man, invited him to join the company. The young man was surprised it was all similar to the recruitment he had heard about. Yang asked Jaehoon to listen to him carefully and not misunderstand him. Hatch specialists were not so easy to get because of the high competition. The young man knew that they were talking about professional agents. Yang didn't know why, but the boss liked Jaehoon, and therefore, if he was looking for a job in his specialty, then he was offered to consider the company. The young man was grateful. Jan also asked to thank the boss for such an opportunity. The young man performed well today and they wished him a happy journey home. In response, the young man also wished a good job and went home with thoughts about a strange day in which the weight was tumbling. The young man could not believe that the boss liked him. Then the thought occurred to him that someone might have cast a spell on him. Soon things went like clockwork. The hero thought that strange thoughts visited him, because magic did not exist in the modern world, and smiling, he thought that from time to time there were good days. His phone rang and he looked into the phone and did not understand what it was. Looking at his phone, the hero saw in front of his father in the amount of 1.5 million won. The girl sent money for the maintenance of Charon's, which the girl talked about last time. The young man planned to return home with a fried chicken to take away, but with this money he could go somewhere to eat. Thinking about the fact that I didn't even stay at work and that today I can have a great time, Jaehoon decided to bring the whole family to the restaurant to eat. Mother and father were pleasantly surprised, but they also found it strange, and they thought that something had happened at the university. The restaurant had high prices, and the parents asked the young man if everything was fine. The hero told that he decided to bring everyone to the restaurant because the project was finished today, and he received money, so everything was fine. Charon sat next to her father and smiled. The money was sent by Charon's mother for food, the young man told his parents. The girl cut a steak, and Grandpa decided to ask who taught the girl this. She replied that it was Mom. The grandmother looked at her granddaughter and said that Charon was very diligent, and she worked hard on raising the girl. And I decided to remember about my son, who broke plates in childhood. How could they be so different? The woman wondered. The young man thought that Charon took after her mother, and the girl looked at her dad and drank her drink. In fact, our hero was a little annoyed that Charon was not like her father in anything. Thinking about this, he looked at the girl who was smiling at her father, but he didn't care about the resemblance. He only knew that it was his daughter, who always smiled at him and was his support in everything. Jaehoon, sitting at a large table with everyone, thanked his parents for looking after the girl these couple of days, and said that they would not have to do this anymore. Parents anxiously asked their son why he spoke about it so sharply and what happened. The young man recalled that the problem with Professor Chan, which he had previously mentioned, had escalated and therefore the professor should not have returned to the university. In the laboratory without him, the young man did not see any sense to stay. Mom asked Jaehoon if this would affect the fate of the professor in his situation. The young man said that everything would be fine and he was not going to get a doctorate. He just wanted to finish his master's degree and do technical research. The father considered his son's idea wise, as long as there were no problems on his way. Mom also believed that everything should have worked out for the young man. Both parents nodded to their son and looked at him. The young man smiled and told his parents that now that he had Sharon, he had to live responsibly. Therefore, I asked my parents not to worry so much. It was late evening, and our hero was walking home with his daughter. Along the way, the young man asked the girl how her days with her grandparents had gone. The girl told her dad that it was very good, and grandma cooked a lot of goodies for the girl. Dad asked the girl with resentment in his voice that she apparently liked living with his parents more than with him. The girl, holding Dad's hand, smiled sweetly and replied that she liked it most with Dad. The young man immediately sparkled from the answer of his child. Taking the girl in his arms, he told Charon that he also liked being with Charon the most and lifting her around laughing. Then Charon touched our hero's glasses and decided to ask Dad if he was comfortable in them. Smiling, the father replied that it was certainly inconvenient. Then the girl asked why the father wore them. Jaehoon replied that he needed to study a lot and therefore had to wear glasses. Then the girl was reassured by this answer. After putting his daughter on his arm and going home, our hero told his daughter that she was so worried that he would be comfortable, and for this the hero was very proud of his daughter. Charon replied that Jaehoon was her father and of course she was worried about making him comfortable, and he felt good. The winter was cold, like all the previous ones, but thanks to Charon, this winter was filled with warmth. The investigation into the case of Professor Chan Dongho progressed quickly because Yerim gathered evidence. The student council went on the offensive after hearing about the professor. Everyone spoke with signs on which they wrote that they wanted the professor to be punished, and that he was fired. There were no more courses he taught. Technically, the professor was fired. Thanks to this, Jaehoon and Charon had a relaxing break. It was morning, and father and daughter were discussing where they could go tomorrow. The girl asked about the amusement park, and the young man replied that this event was waiting for them tomorrow, while the daughter smiled at her father, as always. Jaehoon was also smiling and talking about how tomorrow he and Charon could have a good time and have fun, because the weather was also promised to be good. Only after talking about the weather outside the window, a downpour poured down, and the young man was upset, jumping out of bed. A downpour in the middle of winter just couldn't go. The girl asked what they would do if the rain didn't stop until tomorrow. Our hero decided to get into the weather forecast and saw that it had been changed. The phone showed that heavy rains were expected due to a sudden decrease in atmospheric pressure. Then the father informed the girl that they would not be able to go anywhere because of the weather. The girl said that there was no time for this and it was necessary to pray, and folding her palms, the girl began to pray for good weather. Serious Charon said that if they prayed to the rain spirit together, then the weather would get better. The young man looked at his serious daughter and thought that praying to the rain spirit was, of course, nice, but it would hardly help to change the weather. If the prayers had worked, he would have won the lottery at least 100 times already. Here the girl, looking up from her prayer, looked at the sad father and asked why he did not pray with her. At the moment she asked him to put his hands together and pray like her. Then the girl stood up and confidently asked Dad to repeat after her. The little girl stood with her eyes closed and pressed her palms together. It was necessary to say the following words for the prayer: rain spirit, please don't come tomorrow. Looking at the girl, the young man folded his hands and began to pronounce the words. So they stood together in front of the window, and our hero thought to himself that whether these words would work. He did not want Charon to get upset. The next day came, and the girl was already waking up her father, asking him to wake up as soon as possible. She stood by the young man's bed and asked him to get up quickly to look with him at what she saw. The young man looked at his daughter and realized that the alarm clock had not rung yet. Getting out of bed, our hero looked questioningly at his daughter, who, as always, was full of energy, and asked the young man to get up quickly and go to where she was standing, and quickly. Jaehoon couldn't understand what his daughter wanted to show him so much. Looking out the window, he saw snow falling, and the girl happily asked her father how he liked snow. It was better than rain. It really wasn't raining, and Jaehoon was looking out the window in surprise. The girl also went to the window and told Dad that her words about prayer were true. They prayed together and it worked. The rain stopped coming in the morning. The hero thought about how great it was, because nothing had happened before when he was praying. Our hero believed that this became possible because the air temperature dropped and the water became snow. Looking at Sharon, the young man thought that he had a feeling that everything was going too well lately, although he didn't care about it. Then he suggested Sharon to wash up and go out early. There should have been traffic jams on the roads because of the snow. The girl, as always, answered her father with a smile. The young man thought that he and his daughter would have a lot of time to have fun. Sharon was smiling. The story begins its fascinating narrative. She describes how the action develops around the entrance to the demon realm. A huge portal in the air with a diameter of several meters appeared before the eyes of readers. The mysterious phenomenon was surrounded by blue and dark blue radiance, which was accompanied by bright sparks. The portal was like a funnel or whirlpool in the ocean. A circular movement was formed in some kind of forest area, where a number of tents were set up, located next to a white tent. The camp was set up in a clean location, which was guarded by tall fir trees and lush green bushes. Apparently, the painting depicted summer because people were dressed very lightly. As it turned out, the story was about a special united ordinary group of the demon kingdom. A man was shouting something through a loudspeaker. It became known that he asked everyone to double-check their stocks, teams, and positions. A huge group of warriors stood in the background. Women and men dressed in ordinary everyday uniforms carried daggers and swords of various shapes and sizes. They were chatting about something among themselves. Then the story focused on three heroes. The first of them, a tall guy with brown hair, folded his arms on his chest and replied through a smile that he was somewhat worried, because, in his opinion, this is the first time so many people have gathered. His friend, a man with black hair, made it clear to him that there was nothing to worry about, because they had a flying tiger sect. Moreover, it was rumored that raids with her participation ended with 0 losses. Suddenly, the action caught the reader's attention. According to him, someone's male hands were sharpening a sword. Then the stranger who spoke earlier added on his own that he would like to be accepted into the Flying Tiger sect. The character asked a question to some guy. Just the same, the one who sharpened his edged weapon. He had dark blue hair with long bangs covering his eyebrows, and wore a black t-shirt and pants with a purple jacket. A man with bright amber eyes sitting on 2 wooden boxes. When he was called, he raised his head. As it turned out, he was interrupted. The mysterious handsome man was thinking. Based on his thoughts, readers became aware that the Flying Tiger sect does not select members only by class. Otherwise he would not be here. The man took a deep breath and relaxed. Then the narration decided to introduce the audience to this cute character. His name was Seo Gangram. He was a member of the tertiary insect class and belonged to the Flying Tiger sect. Nevertheless, the man decided to indulge in his memories. 5 years ago, after the Day of Awakening, everyone's abilities were determined from their fate in the database. This term meant what a person was born with. And as it turned out, it depended on the day and time of his birth. Before the eyes of readers appeared a garden seal in the form of a polygon, on which there were various drawings, lines, triangles, hieroglyphs, and zigzags. It was a bright blue color, and small lights sparkled around it, floating on the waves of a light aura. According to the mysterious man, fate was complete nonsense. And now someone interrupted him, touching his broad back, hidden behind a purple jacket. A dark shadow hid the upper part of his face, on which drops of sweat could be seen appearing. Apparently, CEO Gangram got nervous when he was approached. The stranger greeted the guy with dark blue hair and asked him a question. He was interested in the truthfulness of the fact that the man belonged to the Flying Tiger sect. Moreover, he believed that they were on the same team. The speaker had dark hair that gave off a glint of brown, funny with green. He raised his head and held his neck with his left hand, at the same time saying that this was the first time he had ever taken part in a mission for the purpose of destruction. This was the reason for his nervousness, except Seo Gangram didn't answer him. The guy with a somewhat surprised look on his face stared at his interlocutor and silently watched him. In the next episode, the stranger let him know that he felt happy because he would be able to fight side by side with someone from the Flying Tiger sect. As it might seem to readers, such an interest in his person greatly alerted the guy. He lowered his head so much that his long bangs hid the upper part of his face with a shadow, thus making an accent on it. A question rang in his mind, according to which Seo Gangram was trying to find the reason why he spoke to him, making a quick guess that he was a beginner. However, after a short period of time, the speaker was hailed by a guy who was accompanied, standing on the sides, by 2 more. He raised his left hand in a gesture for a man with dark hair with a gleam of iron to approach him. What, in fact, the new character said in the next second. To which the guy asked a question. It seemed to him that the man was not talking to him, so he pointed at himself with his index finger and asked about it. When the character appeared next to him, he was instantly horrified. The reason was that the guy who called out to him reported that the person he had just tried to talk to was Seo Gangram, so he had to be careful. A man with dark hair with a green tinge raised his hands in surprise, and a charge similar to an electric charge seemed to go through his whole body. He instantly became depressed, and after a couple of seconds he glanced at the guy with whom he had been standing and talking a little earlier. A shiver ran down his face and drops of sweat rolled down. Seo Gangram turned his head slightly in his direction and at the same time sheathed his sword. Moreover, the man shouted at the top of his voice that their views had crossed, from which the whites of his eyes completely blocked the iris and pupil, thus giving them a frenzied appearance. But the aura around the mysterious character has thickened, acquiring a heavy dark shade with purple and red colors. The guy everyone shunned so much started looking for something in his brown bag. Behind him, the trio suddenly appeared and began to lead the man away, patting him on the right shoulder. In his thoughts, the main character thought that this was to be expected. And now history has finally decided to answer the questions that have arisen. The fact was that Seo Gangram killed his teammates and stole their powers. The episode began to take on a more intimidating appearance, changing its color scheme from peaceful blue to repulsive pink with a hint of purple. As it turned out, many people returned injured when they were on the same team with Seo Gangram. Moreover, death was attributed to his fate everywhere, because if someone happened to be on the same team with him, then he was bound to fail. History writes off the heavy expression on the guy's face. His languid amber-colored eyes were pronounced against the background of a face dark with shadow. Even the pupils acquired a feline appearance, due to which the man looked like a predator. The character even attributed such a stereotype to himself, referring to the fact that such rumors spread because of his strength. Then, in a new episode, Seo Gangram waved his left index finger, which made the so-called window of fate appear in front of him. On its brown background, readers could see a large seal in the form of a star with 4 yin-yang symbols. The story decided to delve into the description of the characteristics of the main character. His fate belonged to a class called the Third Dragon Stage, which meant that the guy could check the windows of his fate and the fate of other people. Moreover, as it became known a moment later, the man was able to partially extract the fate of a dead opponent and make it his own, but this, unfortunately, was added to his karma, a sinister force that allowed Seo Gangram to steal fate from a corpse. That's what it was. It was also true, according to his reflections, that many people who were his comrades were injured. For example, the picture describes how a character was stabbed in the stomach, and the second helped him move. Then the narration focuses on the figure of the main character, who was sitting on 2 wooden boxes with his head down. Due to the fact that he was drooping due to a terrible past, an aura thickened around him. It had a dark purple color and descended on the man's body in the form of toxic smoke. He made the assumption that all of them were influenced by his unfortunate fate. In the next episode, the story decided to familiarize readers with the classes of fate. There were 5 of them. The highest class was the divine. A figure of a character with long blonde hair appeared before the eyes of the audience, who held a tall staff with a rounded end in her right hand. Even the aura around her was magical. After him came dragon, ghost, human and insect, which, in fact, was presented further. These 4 classes were divided into primary, secondary and tertiary, and, as it became known, the main character himself belonged to the lowest class, which was at the very bottom. Tactful insect class. The next episode described how Seo Gangram sat helplessly in a dark space, which was illuminated by a bright column of light falling directly on his silhouette. He bent down a little, and the ground, holding his body with his hands. In other words, he lacked the strength to kill another awakened one. From this heavy thought, the man made a dissatisfied expression on his face. He strained his eyebrows and nose, from which his wrinkles were emphasized even more, and the eyes expressed anger and, to some extent, resentment. However, the flow of his thoughts did not end there. Now Seo Gangram was explaining that there were also several conditions that had to be met in order to use his power. Except, as it turned out, the guy didn't even kill any of his comrades and didn't even steal the fate of corpses. He lowered his head and placed his right hand on his left, which held a sword scabbard. However, in the next second, the main character closed his eyes, which were hidden by the shadow of his long bangs, and wondered why he was upset at all at the moment. Suddenly, someone called out to Seo Gangram. It was a girl with dark hair pulled back in a high ponytail. She placed both hands on the wooden box and rested her small head on them. Her green eyes played with childish discontent, because she was interested in the question of what the guy was doing in this place all alone. Such a sudden appearance made the man wary. He jerked his hand in surprise and made a funny sound, calling the heroine by name, "You heron." To which she pulled a beaming smile from ear to ear and replied that it was obvious. There was a dinner party planned after the extermination mission, so she asked if Seo Gangram would go. Then the story presented the following information to readers. Yu Heron belonged to the divine class in the Flying Tiger sect. Suddenly, a man with short blue hair and bright blue eyes entered the dialogue. He turned to his Hyung, saying that last time Seo Gangram was not there either, so this time he just had to come. It was Yang Tihong, who came from the Middle Ghost class. He also came from the Flying Tiger sect. However, this did not help. The main character gave a firm negative answer, and then suddenly stood up and began to move in the opposite direction from his interlocutors. The guy asked him what the reason was, to which he replied that he was too lazy. That's just not the thought that flashed through my head. Even if he went, the members of other sects would still treat him like trash. Then Yu Heron decided to say her line. She exclaimed that she had missed the school trip in order to come, and the next moment, after a couple of seconds, she made a bold assumption that it was because of losers who were afraid of the guy. The short girl put her hands on her sides and asked who they were, demanding that Seo Gangram tell her. And he turned his head over his left shoulder and asked if she was aware that he was scarier than her by more than 10 years. However, this did not confuse her, because she added out loud that her strength exceeded his. Yu Heron puffed out her cheeks defiantly, making a touchy look. Then a tall guy, Yang Tihong, entered the dialogue. He grabbed the man by the right arm and said that everyone got drunk on the spot, so he definitely had to go. It didn't sound like a request. The main character narrowed his eyes and silently watched his buddies. Yu Heron appeared to his left, who also positively exclaimed, adding from herself that she would cope with anyone who tried to intimidate Seo Gangram. However, they were interrupted. Someone called out to the girl and Yang Tihong. The trio turned in the direction from which the sound was coming. As it turned out, it was a tall man who understood that the guys had a desire to have fun with Seo Gangram. But the mission was about to start any minute, so they had to return to their positions. The stranger had dark brown hair with brown eyes. The story made it clear to readers that it was Kang Donghyun, who belonged to the second human class. He also, like the three heroes, was part of the Flying Tiger sect. After a couple of seconds, the girl waved her hands and, giving up, gave a positive answer. And Yang Tihong pointed to his friend and told Hyun that he had made a promise that he would come to the festive dinner. The couple began to move in the opposite direction from the main character, who waved them with his left hand in a gesture of farewell. His friend said goodbye to him, and he pulled a smile in response. Suddenly, Kang Donghyun appeared behind him, who patted Seo Gangram on the left shoulder and asked him to take care of himself. The man laughed and gave him an ambiguous reaction, referring to the fact that the groups that stood on the front line were the only ones in danger, but as for him, he was behind their backs. However, the guy was upset by the fact that the main character was still not by his side. Readers could see Seo Gangram's face up close. He looked tired because of the bruises under his eyes. The guy smiled easily and let him know that he understood, thanking him along the way. In the next episode, Kang Donghyun retired from the main character. His figure was brightly illuminated by the sunlight, which, apparently, was setting over the horizon. But the silhouette of the main character, on the contrary, remained in the shadow. However, this would not prevent readers from seeing his drooping gaze. The fact was that the man would also like to fight side by side with him. His amber eyes stood out strongly against the background of his dark face. The guy was holding a scabbard in his left hand and holding a backpack with his right. The story tells that the special mission to destroy the Demon Kingdom has finally begun. The loudspeaker was notifying everyone to start performing the duties assigned to their groups. The picture caught the attention of the audience on Seo Gangram, who stood among the crowd and watched what would be said next. Suddenly, a bright blue color appeared in the sky, which was several meters in size. Several lightning bolts were coming from this huge hole. She raised the wind and large clouds of smoke with ash. Then the narration focused on the main character, whose face seemed to shine from the glow. His hair was developing, but it still hid his closed and relaxed eyes. The guy was thinking in his head that he would just take care of the demons left behind. After all, he needed to try hard so that he would not cause damage to his sect. Then Seo Gangram passed through the blue portal, from which he sparkled and provoked the appearance of small electric charges. Suddenly, someone shouted at the top of his voice again, announcing that high-class monsters appeared in droves, so the leading groups needed to get inside as soon as possible. Several monsters of different sizes and colors appeared before the eyes of readers: blue, red, black. That's just that each of them had their eyes burning with a bright flame. How many times they were zombified. The groups that led the rear had to be ready at the entrance. The story focused on Yang Tihong, who used his hands in battle, on which gloves that emit blue lightning converged. Behind him were other guys whose magic had a pink tinge, but his girlfriend, heroine, was riding on some kind of animal. Moreover, even Kang Donghyun took part. He used some cards from which fire emanated. Suddenly, the following episode describes a blue monster that looks like a mad dog. He opened his mouth wide, decorated with sharp fangs. Thus the beast tried to grab the coveted prey. However, Kang Donghyun managed to repel his failed attack. And even Yang Tihong managed to defeat some kind of monster. A bright turquoise aura formed around him, as if it was oozing from his blow. But towards heroine, sitting on a wooden figure in the form of a lioness or a panther, monsters with pink energy were moving. Suddenly, the action is transferred to the rear groups, which were given the order to prepare for battle, because now the Sogvi will be called. The reader was confronted with some kind of silhouette of a huge horned creature with long red horns and hair. A dark energy appeared around this toothy demon, and then, when he shouted and leveled up to his full height, pulsations and pressure began to appear from his body. Someone ordered the advanced groups to ignore the low-class monsters and hold their positions. That's just the story tells how the main character was surrounded by other people, next to whom a dark force flashed in places. Seo Gangram readied his sword and assumed a defensive posture. 3 creatures appeared on the horizon. These little demons had red eyes and a huge head compared to their body. Then the following episode allowed us to take a closer look at the pupils of one of them. They looked like a cat, thus giving him a predatory appearance. It might have seemed to the lounger that the monster was smiling, because now he had to catch his victim. That's just the main character did not allow it. With one swing of his cold weapon, he dealt a crushing blow to this demon, leaving a blue trail after him and causing a small gust of wind. In the next episode, Seo Gangram still continues to fight. He boldly repels the attack from his rivals. But there was no end to the monsters, they appeared from different angles. The main character, after another blow, knocked down the creature, provoking the appearance of a column of smoke and dust. But suddenly the narrative describes some long branches with sharp thorns. In his thoughts, the man came to the conclusion that there were more of them than he expected. Moreover, he was now quite deep, so much so that it was difficult for him to breathe because of the demonic energy. The guy literally gulped air greedily to restore heavy breathing. Now it was possible to understand that he was tired. Then he decided it was time to get out of there quickly. Behind Seo Gangram, a silhouette of a horned monster with predatory red eyes appeared, which froze in the air and made a swinging movement. He did not have time to react and received a blow in the back, which was accentuated by a red glow of light. This took the main character by surprise and even made him stagger forward. The story described how these little creatures gathered in one pile and smiled from ear to ear, rejoicing. Apparently, that one of them managed to harm the guy. When this creature knocked Seo Gangram to the ground and struck him, the rest of his brethren rushed towards the main character. The man closed his eyes and mentally called for help. And suddenly, a bright green glow appeared around him, which to some extent even blinded. The painting describes the appearance of a long vine with thorns. I saw a girl with brown hair on top of her, who had a black patch over her right eye. She held a sword in the river, but at the same time conjured another one. As it turned out, it was the power of the head of the Flying Tiger sect. People shouted at the top of their voices that she took care of the rear groups. They thanked her along the way, and waved their hands at her. The main character got to his feet and cast a glance in that direction. He whispered his thanks and waved his right hand, pulling a soft smile. In response, the heroine with long hair and an eye patch showed her palm, waving it. It became known that her name was Shin Soa. The girl came from the tertiary divine class, and she was also the head of the Flying Tiger sect. Suddenly, the action began to describe falling objects. This caught Shin Soa's attention, making her tense up. Then some strange, terrifying sounds were heard. From below, people asked questions to their boss. They were interested in what it was, and didn't they still have a long way to go before they got to the boss. However, after a short period of time, a huge monster appeared on the horizon. It had huge horns, fangs, and a trunk. The monster opened its mouth, growling and raising streams of air, which formed a wind. The creature moved on massive clawed paws. Someone was horrified, making the assumption that this, similar to the words with the red mane, the monster was the boss. Then the following order was received. The fire-type hunters should have moved into battle. The story focused on the fiery red eyes of the monster. They seemed hypnotic, and there was a scar on the trunk. The monster opened its mouth, when suddenly a blue glow appeared in front of it in the form of a high column of light. Then blood appeared and dust rose. There was a wind. Its gust was so strong that the characters had to close their eyes, thus protecting them from dirt. Nothing was visible for a while. However, later it became clear to readers that the trunk of a huge monster was bleeding. Suddenly, the episode began to describe the silhouette of some girl with long hair. There was a bright pink glow around her, which instantly changed to blue. The mysterious heroine asked a question in a demanding tone of voice. It became known that she was interested in where Seo Gangram was. She had blonde hair and bright eyes. The girl walked confidently through the clouds of smoke. The others looked at her with admiration and some surprise, their mouths agape. Then someone cursed and wondered what was going on. The crowd began to thicken when questions began to appear about who the heroine was. And the man himself, looking down, thought and was surprised that this woman had just killed the boss alone. Moreover, he was looking for reasons why she was looking for him. The girl swung her sword, which caused a bright blue glow to appear, and behind her one could see the body of the defeated monster. She replied that everything was fine. Then the heroine closed her eyes and struck again. Except it wasn't monsters that got it, but people. Before the eyes of readers appeared someone's hand lying on the bare ground. And then the look of the main character, who was surprised by this outcome of events. The mysterious heroine decided to destroy everyone because she assumed that Seo Gangram was among them. The story decided to remind attentive readers of the picture of how a mysterious girl with long blonde hair and glowing eyes delighted the main character by the fact that she had just single-handedly defeated the boss. Moreover, he did not fully understand why this stranger was looking for him. In the next episode, a man hid behind a huge vine with sharp thorns and began to watch her. A light golden glow appeared around him, and in his head at this time a clever thought was born. The guy was thinking whether he should first check the girl with the help of a fate determinant. Suddenly, the story tells how Seo Gangram did it after all. He activated his power, and then it became clear to the audience and to him that the heroine was named Baekyeon. Only she came from the first divine class, and for this simple and obvious reason, her fate was protected. The latest information greatly discouraged the man. His eyes rounded to the impossible. His eyebrows rose in surprise, thus emphasizing the small wrinkles and dark circles under the lower eyelid. The guy, whose face skin was instantly covered with sweat, opened his mouth and thought that he had never seen such a class before. As it turned out, a little later, that the ability of the first divine class was the fact that people who possessed it were able to return to the past with the preservation of their current memories, but it could not be used after death. The man watched as the representatives of the human race continued to gather in a bunch to look at the current situation. He was standing on top of a huge vine and decided that he had to go down there because, in his opinion, the girl came because of some information about him. Then a bright green glow formed around the huge natural structure, which somewhat alerted the guy. As it turned out, the head of the Flying Tiger sect notified the main character to stay in place. Thanks to the mental actions of the man, the audience could get acquainted with the technique of distant whispering. After such a small monologue, the thick vine gradually began to cover the figure of Seo Gangram. Then the thought was divorced in his head, according to which, this was not the place and time where and when he could interfere. The story focused on Shin Soa, a girl with long brown hair and a black patch over her right eye. A green aura appeared around the heroine, which indicated that she was conjuring at the moment. Then, when the girl took a couple of steps in the direction of the uninvited guest, she asked her a question. She was interested in what their new interlocutor wanted. She, in turn, asked the head of the Flying Tiger sect if she was a person under the name Seo Gangram. Baekyeon, with her hands down, looked at the huge vines with sharp thorns moving in her direction. People looked at her from below. However, Shin Soa was not afraid to enter into a dialogue. She gave a clear answer, according to which the main character was a member of her sect, so the mysterious stranger could talk to her. There was confidence on her face. The wind blew her long wavy hair, thus giving a fresh look and a cheerful look. But Baekyeon is up to something. The girl closed her eyes and made it clear that everything was fine. Suddenly, a bright blue glow poured into space, which hurt not monsters, but people. As it turned out, it was a mysterious girl, apparently with dark intentions. She made a swinging motion with her sword and in a menacing tone of voice exclaimed that in that case she would simply destroy everyone. The story focused readers' attention on her face, part of which was covered in blood. Her blue eyes shone ominously against the background of her skin dark with shadow. Baekyeon explained her cruel action by saying that she made an offer to find Seo Gangram among them. Then someone shouted at the top of his voice that he would never forget her. Some activity attracted the mysterious girl, who continued to strike, causing her silhouette to turn red. She raised her eyes, in which you could see a cat's pupil, which made the heroine look like a predator that had tracked down its prey. As it turned out, it was Shin Soa, the head of the Flying Tiger sect. She was angry, you could tell by her burning green eyes. The girl made a swinging motion with her sword, pointing it at her opponent. Suddenly the picture showed the main character. He used his powerful sword to break down the thick vine obstacle while thinking that he was the one this woman was looking for. It was for this simple and obvious reason that the man had to come forward. A dark aura gathered around him, accompanied by small black sparks. Seo Gangram's eyes were pronounced against the background of dark skin, which was hidden by the shadow of a long dark blue bang. He made a snarl and continued to strike, trying to get out of a kind of prison until it was too late. Then the main character abruptly stuck his cold weapon into a tree, which caused fiery sparks. The guy was angry. Moreover, he was trying to convey in a demanding tone to Shin Soa so that she would let him pass. However, the story sharpened readers' attention to what was happening below. Crowds of people rushed in the opposite direction from Baekhyun, calling her a murderer. Despite such a fast movement, the heroine walked smoothly and confidently. Her figure could be seen far away, next to the body of the defeated boss. But the members of the Flying Tiger sect, on the contrary, were scared. There was fear on their faces. Shin Soa joined the battle. She was standing in front of a mysterious girl who was looking for the main character, beating off her strong blows, which were accompanied by magical reflections. However, Baekhyun's facial expressions did not reflect even a drop of advanced. Apparently, she was so victorious. The heroine said out loud that she would leave the others alive if her rival just gave Seo Gangram. That's just the head of the Flying Tiger sect gave a negative answer. She couldn't allow someone to dare to kill someone from her family of some kind. Then she struck again, which the stranger managed to repel. After a short period of time, Baekhyun increased the pressure of her attack. Readers could notice how she made a sharp movement that provoked the appearance of a huge flow of blue energy, which was reflected from the red. Such a magical manipulation caused a wind that raised clouds of smoke and dust. But Shin Soa didn't have time to react. The story describes how she flew several meters away and hit her back against the wall, contributing to the emergence of a small whirlwind gust that demolished even stone structures. The head of the Flying Tiger sect greedily gulped air in order to recover her heavy breathing. She was wounded, readers could tell by her bloody chin. The girl lowered her head so that the expression of her eyes could not be seen because of the long bangs. However, it was clear that she had a very difficult time. Suddenly, in the next episode, the heroine leaned on her back, turning her face to the top. Except her eyes were closed, and her eyebrows were strained from severe pain. She clenched her teeth, baring her teeth in this way, and made a heart-rending sound. Then Baekhyun herself appeared in front of him. The girl took a couple of steps towards her opponent and swung her sword. 3 silhouettes appeared behind the mysterious but rather strong stranger. It was the members of the Flying Tiger sect who were rushing to help Shin Soa. That's why the head shouted. Probably for this simple reason, Baekhyun managed to notice the approaching danger. She turned her head slightly and stared at people with her predatory burning gaze. Without thinking twice, the girl struck, followed by a bright blue trail. And then the blood. The insidious heroine jumped up, thus being in the air, and after a short period of time, although rather instantly, she found herself next to Kang Donghyun. He did not have time to notice how a representative of the first divine class appeared in front of him and tried to deliver a crushing blow. Because as soon as the guy soared up with his hand, he made a sound of defeat. That's just the story still continued to keep readers' attention on the head of the Flying Tiger sect, who was sitting against a stone wall with her head down. A fierce battle was going on around her between her comrades and Baekhyun, who was holding on confidently and expecting a new attack, when suddenly Yang Tihong approached her, whose weapon was presented in the form of iron gloves. The guy appeared as if out of thin air. His speed was so fast that he broke through space. The man wanted to use his glove, but the mysterious girl caught his hand and stopped the attack in this way. Then she said in a menacing tone that Yang Tihong was standing in her way. The picture changed its angle. Now it described how a group of people stopped next to a blue wall, through which they could not pass. Someone shouted out of it for his comrades to get out as soon as possible. He was interested in the question of what they were doing. The narration sharpened the reader's attention to the stranger, who was knocking on the barrier with both hands, which, not yielding to his strength. As it turned out, there was a barrier in this place. Suddenly, the action returns to the girl with long blonde hair. She was heading towards the group that was watching her expectantly. Everyone turned their heads in her direction, watching what would follow next. Then plaintive cries were heard. People were helplessly begging for help. After a certain period of time, the story described the main character. He leaned on his sword and lowered his head, thinking. According to his thoughts, the man had to get out of the so-called prison of vines. However, Baekhyun could now be heard shouting furiously, asking where Seo Gangram was. The guy cut the tree with his edged weapon, and, still not calling his face, came to the conclusion that he had a little more left. Having dealt another blow to the huge vines, the main character began to gulp air greedily, thus trying to restore heavy breathing. And finally everything was ready. He managed to escape. And in the next episode, Seo Gangram was already falling down somewhere. However, the guy did not have time to group up, or, apparently, he fell on his stomach due to the fact that he was exhausted after a long struggle with magical plants, which froze dead, locking him. When the main character leaned on both his hands and raised his head, he saw something terrible. His amber eyes turned red. The guy's bloody face froze, waiting for something. As it turned out, chaos reigned everywhere around him. His once former comrades were lying motionless on the cold ground, which is why it acquired a somewhat purple color. Baekhyun was in front of him. The girl's body was pointed in his direction. Then the action allowed readers to look in profile at the face of the main character, who still hasn't uttered a word from what he saw. His long bangs tried to hide his surprised and horrified look, but his eyes, shining brightly, did not allow this to be done. The mysterious stranger took a step forward. An aura thickened around her, acquiring a dark lilac color. The man was looking around, probably in this way. He was trying to find his friends. At the same time, the main character thought that he had come too late. Now his face had acquired a bluish hue. He opened his mouth and did not make any sounds, as if something did not allow him. The man looked at the place where he was lying. It was in the blood of his comrades. The story describes how the guy clenched his teeth, making a grin. Drops of either sweat or tears flowed down his cheek. But everything could only end with him. Baekhyun had already approached his figure and was looking down at him, crying and thinking that this whole situation was because of him, a simple insect. Then the girl made a guess out loud that the person sitting in front of her was Seo Gangram. Her eyes were filled with anger, and when she wanted to deliver a crushing blow, she was stopped. Thick vines appeared around her, shining with a bright green glow. He rose up from the ground, thus imprisoning her in the dome. To Baekhyun's left, the head of the Flying Tiger sect appeared, shouting at the top of her voice. How could she do such a ruthless thing? The girl seemed to be flying in the direction of her rival, who instantly turned her head in her direction over her left shoulder. Shin-So once made it clear to her that she would not allow the ruthless heroine to touch the members of her sect. Then they locked their swords. When the representative of the first divine class glanced at the furious face of the head of the Flying Tiger sect, she said out loud that she did not understand this. After all, if she had only given her Seo Gangram, then everything could have ended differently. Baekhyun's sword shone with a bright blue aura that matched the color of her hair and eyes. Moreover, Shin-So would be able to save everyone else. But the latter did not have time to react, as she was dealt a crushing blow. In pain, she bowed her head, probably in order to hide her exhausted appearance, and made it clear that this was the duty of the sect leader. She was supposed to protect. Every word was given to her with such difficulty, but the heroine was not going to give up. The last sentence, on the contrary, inspired her. Her green eyes reflected the desire and strength. The girl revealed her magical energy that enveloped her body. She grabbed her opponent's limb with both hands, and then a strong push followed. Suddenly, the action describes the main character, behind whom there was a surge of emerald energy. His facial expressions expressed a kind of bewilderment. Fear froze in his eyes, and his mouth opened from the lack of words and reflected quiet horror. As it turned out, the barrier was removed. According to the narrative, Seo Gangram sat on the cold ground, resting on both hands, and silently watched the fight. Then the episode allowed us to see his amber eyes burning with evil in close-up, on which tears welled up. The main character gave himself up to his thoughts. The following words echoed in his mind. The guy couldn't beat her, he'd be smitten too, because she's here to kill him. Seo Gangram glanced at Baekhyun, around whom a mysterious aura was flaring up with renewed vigor, transmitted to her sword. The girl finished with her opponents and stood proudly among the huge vines. According to the man, he was the only one who had to die. However, everything did not happen as he wished. Then the main character turned his attention and readers to Shin-So. The girl's body was lying quietly face down on the cold ground. It could seem as if its last warmth was evaporating in the air. Seo Gangram made a bold assumption that she was in the same place as his comrades. It became known that a check of corpses in the area had begun. As soon as the main character read this information, a tear spilled down his right cheek. He didn't understand what was happening and how to react correctly. Then the blue plaque system notified him, asking a question. As it turned out, Seo Gangram made an offer to use the power of stealing fate. After that, the man was transformed. An aura thickened around him, acquiring a dark, mysterious shade. His eyes lit up, making his gaze look like a predatory one. Apparently, some crazy idea was born in the guy's head. After a short period of time, it became known that he had activated his stealing fate power. The story began to explain to readers that now his karma will accumulate when using force. She described how a huge white seal formed around him and the bodies of his comrades. There were small impulses coming from her. Probably for this reason, Baekhyun slightly pulled away. As it turned out, there were currently 421 dead in the area. The next moment, the system asked the main character whose power he wanted to steal. Then readers were allowed to see his facial expressions up close. It was noticeable that the man was worried. He bit his lower lip, thus making a certain grin. Aloud, he made it clear that he wanted each of them 421. There was a glint of madness in his amber eyes. Their light was strongly expressed against the background of dark skin from the shadow. Around his body, small lines of aura sparkled, which were of different colors, including blue and purple. Suddenly, the action revealed his dark silhouette. The guy grabbed his sword and leaned on his left leg, intending to stand up or even join the fight. The story continues its rapid and exciting development, forcing readers to worry about the decisions of the main character. At the moment, there was a check to see if there were any destinies that could be stolen. The narrative describes how the magical aura continued to thicken around Seo Gangram, who stuck his cold weapon into the ground and stared at his rival with an evil expression on his face. Apparently, because of the huge seal, the man's body passed through a multicolored aura. His amber eyes expressed the desire to eliminate Baekhyun, who had harmed his comrades. A thought arose in the guy's head, according to which it all happened because of the person who had the fate of an insect. In the next episode, the system made an explanation. It became known that due to the low magic rank of the main character, only one condition will be met. Then the story focused on his appearance. It might seem as if the man felt unbearable pain. He closed his eyes and furrowed his brows, which made his small wrinkles visible. A slight breeze was blowing his hair, thus giving a casual look. In his head, he asked a question. Seo Gangram wondered how many people died because of this. That's just the system made it clear that due to the massive influx of goals, destinies will be chosen randomly. According to Seo Gangram, they were right. His magic was increased after receiving a portion of the target's magic. He received the ability Budding Brown Flower and then the Hidden Form technique. Episodes surfaced in his head as a stranger addressed the main character, saying that he killed people wherever he went. Next, the system notified him that his resistance to the water attribute had been increased. The mind remembered how heroine invited a man to her in case someone bothered him. However, the character still continued to reproach himself for what had happened. After all, even Yang Tihong believed that there was no one better than Seo Gangram. The guy got the abilities and axe weighing 1,000 pounds and air gate. In his opinion, his fate killed everyone. The main character suddenly grabbed his head, which was filled with various thoughts. His heavy gaze took on a mad look when suddenly drops of blood appeared from his mouth. The system continued to inform him about the new powers, but he no longer listened to it. But suddenly someone turned to him, saying that the guy had a rather interesting fate. Seo Gangram raised his eyes, which were burning, giving him a dangerous look. The main character once again received a new ability. Now it was the wood leaf method. As it turned out, Baekhyun was talking to him. The girl looked down at him and said out loud that it was time to end this. The man kidnapped the fate of 421 people, when all of a sudden he inflicted damage on his rival, at the same time shouting at the top of his voice that it was all her fault. The heroine was somewhat surprised because she was injured. The characters reflected each other's blows, from which the contact of their swords provoked the formation of bright sparks. Each character had his own aura. Baekhyun, as readers could have understood for a long time, had a delicate blue color, and Seo Gangram purple. The man in his head was making plans for the fight, so the thought stuck in his mind that he wouldn't let it end this way. His bright amber eyes reflected the reflections of some madness, which gave him an angry and somewhat frightened appearance. Moreover, the main character was seriously determined to take revenge on this woman before his death. Seo Gangram struck another blow, but the representative of the first divine class managed to repel it, although she had to take a couple of steps back. The reader might even think that both characters were fighting on equal terms. Suddenly, the story lowered the audience that the main character activated first the ability Sword Master, and then Hawkeye. The next episode allowed us to see his amber eyes in close-up. They clearly reflected the silhouette of Baekhyun, who was fighting with such confidence with a man. A magical aura appeared near the top of his face, having a golden hue in the form of smoke. Moreover, the character continued to activate new abilities, thus testing one after another. It was the turn of reflexes. Suddenly, Seo Gangram's speed increased to an unimaginable size, as if he was moving through space. A strong wind was bending around his body, developing both clothes and long dark blue hair. However, apparently, the use of unfamiliar forces to some extent negatively affected the main character, because blood flowed from his nose. The next moment, the guy approached his opponent and turned his back on her. It is made in such a way in order to successfully attack Baekhyun and quickly turn around. As it turned out, the girl did not expect such an unexpected attack, but only thanks to her experience, she did not get caught. Next in line was the Golden Buddha ability, and then rigidity and resistance to pain. The aura of the main character began to take on a completely different look. From light purple, she moved to a bloody burgundy, which mixed with black. Seo Gangram continued to activate his new powers. The story in another episode tells that he decided to test the air gate, and then the man demonstrated it for his rival, and not only, readers also saw it. The guy instantly moved from top to bottom, jumping through the air. But there was something strange. Baekhyun kept up with him. It was as if she had teleported after him, following ridiculously fresh footsteps. Subsequently, Seo Gangram activated the 1,000-pound height axe ability. He raised his sword, the blade of which was slightly broken in several places. His once amber eyes sparkled with a purple color, which gave him a certain crazy look. The man's facial expressions have also changed. She became more violent. It might even seem that a charge similar to an electric one had passed through it. The main character made a swinging motion in an attempt to finally end this fight. Suddenly, a thought popped into his head. As it turned out, Baekhyun was open, and, apparently, Seo Gangram was watching her from somewhere above. The girl was rushing from side to side in an attempt to find her opponent, who suddenly disappeared from the horizon. Then her blue eyes, which spoke of anger and malice, turned to the main character. Only readers could notice how the representative of the first divine class closed her hands, after which a bright charge of the same color as her magic appeared. The girl turned her head over her left shoulder and carefully watched the opponent she managed to track down. Suddenly, the following episode describes how a huge glacier formed in space. Apparently, it arose because of another activated ability of the main character. Readers became aware that it was called the Call of the Ice Thorn. Then the story tells that Seo Gangram had a hard time. The man staggered back slightly and tipped his head over. He was having such a hard time transferring new abilities that his body screamed so much. After all, the audience could notice how blood appeared from his mouth again. Only this time it came with a new force. Then he fell, sprinkling the cold ground with red paint. From a strong push, the man even slipped a little on it. In the next episode, Seo Gangram cursed and banged his fist on the blood trail. He pondered and after a short period of time came to the conclusion that even if he had these abilities, he still did not know how to use them correctly. In his opinion, the man was very lucky because there were those who activated themselves, but there was only one but. The picture sharpened readers' attention to the appearance of Seo Gangram. He closed his teeth, thus making a grin, and strained his eyebrows, which made his already predatory eyes seem dangerous and cruel. The man was lying on the cold ground, covered with blood, face down. Suddenly, he raised his head, following the actions of his opponent, holding a broken sword in his right hand, or rather what was left of it. The thought echoed in his head, according to which the main character could not use his new powers with this body and such weapons. He went on to speculate that even after the guy stole the destinies of 421 people, he still wasn't able to take revenge properly. The next episode began to describe the small pieces of ice that appeared in the air, which looked like careless spearheads. Then the story described that these magical creations froze, forming circles. As it turned out, they were controlled by Baekhyun. The girl raised her sword. She was looking at her opponent and waiting for something. Suddenly, these pieces of ice flew in the direction of Seo Gangram. He used all his muscles to lift his injured and tired body and take shelter from danger. As readers might have noticed to themselves, he managed to do it. But in his head there were thoughts of a completely different nature. The man thought that if he only understood what these skills were capable of. However, he failed to finish his line. Seo Gangram closed his eyes and pursed his lips. A drop of sweat appeared on his face. Readers could only guess what he was thinking. Apparently, he didn't have a plan right now because he was acting on the basis of the situation. When suddenly, the silhouette of Baekhyun, who was standing a few meters away from him, appeared in front of him. An icy aura literally formed around the girl, because readers could notice how huge blocks of ice stood behind her. The guy's amber eyes began to reflect a quiet horror. He froze. The reason was that the main character at the time became confident in himself. He hoped with every fiber of his soul for the end in his favor, because there was one ability that he knew well. Except he was interrupted. The opponent launched her magic weapon at him, hitting his leg. The ice tip seriously injured Seo Gangram. He reproduced a quiet cry and began to get rid of the sharp object. And Baekhyun, in turn, was walking slowly towards the main character. In the next episode, the narration allowed to see his facial expression up close. Deep bags appeared under the amber eyes, although, apparently, these were small wrinkles that became more emphasized due to the fact that the guy strained his eyebrows and forehead from pain. A mysterious girl originating from the first divine class started a dialogue. In her opinion, everything the guy did was pointless. The reason was that Seo Gangram was destined to die. But the man, in turn, was not going to give up. He let out an involuntary cry and freed his left leg from a large piece of ice. Suddenly, huge vines appeared from the ground, around which there was a bright green aura. The main character stood on both feet and put his hands in different directions, thus keeping his balance. In his head, he thought that his understanding was quite enough. Readers could notice how Baekhyun jumped onto a tree that continued to grow and wriggle. This ability was called the wood leaf method. Vines with sharp thorns continued to attack the girl, which made her somewhat surprised. Her eyes were wide open, making it easier for her to follow the danger that had arisen. She used her sword to fight the growing threat. Now readers could get into the head of a representative of the first divine class. Episodes from past fights appeared in her mind. Then she jumped down and thought that compared to the previous experience, the girl decided that the man was a swordsman. In her opinion, Seo Gangram was pretty well versed in spells. Once again, the heroine made a swinging motion, followed by a long blue light. However, not a single muscle on her face twitched. Baekhyun was still serious. That's just, in any case, spells like this, the wood leaf method. The girl did not finish her remark, because she was busy eliminating the vines that appeared, which seemed to have no end. With a couple of strokes, she managed to cut a few dozen trees that were moving in her direction, trying to overtake the mysterious heroine and hide her in a kind of prison. The representative of the first divine level was firmly convinced that it would be difficult for Seo Gangram to maintain this for a long time. After destroying another vine, the girl looked down and directed her left hand there. She did it to maintain balance. That's just attentive viewers could notice how someone's hand was hiding behind the rest of the tree. In the next episode, the silhouette of the main character suddenly appeared. His figure was rapidly moving towards his opponent from the back. While she was fighting off the emerging threat, Seo Gangram appeared behind her, holding her ice tip in his left hand. Madness shone in the guy's eyes. He looked like a predator that was about to overtake its prey. The strong wind blew his hair, which made him look even more careless. Then the story directed the reader's attention in close-up to the expression of Baekhyun's facial expressions. She lowered her faded blue eyes and looked at her body, which was splattered with drops of blood. Her drops of blood. In the next episode, it was clearly shown how the main character managed to deliver a crushing blow, thus stopping his rival. As it might seem, Seo Gangram was somewhat worried. Readers could tell by the look on his face. The man was looking at the red marks from his blow, which were moving to his left. Then he took a stronger grip on the ice tip, which the story focused the attention of the audience, who were waiting with tension for the outcome of the battle of the two characters. Suddenly, the story described a smile that quickly appeared on the guy's face. It was more like a grin. Apparently, he was pleased with the outcome of events. Baekhyun's body began to fall, and in his head, the main character was thinking about the fact that he managed to deliver a crushing blow and defeat a representative of the first divine class. In his opinion, he had achieved his revenge. Seo Gangram, like his former opponent, was picking up speed, rushing to the ground. He was flying down with his back to the place where Baekhyun was already lying down. The next line echoed in his mind, when the main character found himself on the body of his rival, who was lying on the bloody cold ground. He thought he could avenge the murder. His tired eyes burned with joy and a desire to live. The man pulled a victorious smile from ear to ear and looked to the left. It's over. That's just in the next episode. He coughed up blood, which is why he had to stand up a little in order not to choke. As the story went, he activated the ability regeneration. However, Seo Gangram gave the order not to do this. He lowered his head and started holding his stomach with his right hand. And the next moment, the activation of the ability was cancelled. A question was heard in his head, according to which the guy wanted to know what the meaning was. Now there were tears in his eyes. It was hard not to notice them on the blood-stained face, which was decorated with bruises under the eyes. The man was smiling a bitter smile. In his opinion, nothing will change in any case. In the new episode, readers had the opportunity to take a look at the space in which Seo Gangram was located. It was completely destroyed. The remains of destroyed vines were scattered everywhere. Also, the earth was sprinkled with drops of red paint in the bodies of the main character's comrades. Everything began to gradually acquire a black hue. According to the character, then and now, nothing else has changed. The guy indulged in his memories, starting from his childhood. A small boy with huge eyes appeared before the eyes of readers, which gave the hero a defenseless appearance. There were two silhouettes next to him, one of which was gently hugging the character. Someone turned to the young Seo Gangram, trying to convey to him that his fate was replete with perseverance and death. Moreover, he was predicted that the boy would lose his parents at a fairly young age, and his life would be full of misfortunes. All these terrible words were spoken by a man whose face could not be distinguished by readers. This character wore a traditional Oriental costume. As he said, the main character really lost his parents before he even matured, and because he got into various accidents, everyone around him put the brand of a loser on him. Seo Gangram remembered everyone who had somehow come into contact with him and somehow suffered. The first was a girl with long hair. Her eye and neck were injured. The second was a character with a long scythe, turned his back to the audience. The man was firmly convinced that he was destined to be weak and doomed to misfortune. However, there were people who, despite everything, managed to influence him. Among them were Yang Tihong, Yu Heron, Shin Su and Kang Donghyun. Except they died because of him. At this moment, Seo Gangram was sitting with his head down alone in a space filled with chaos and disorder. The corpses of his comrades lay around him. In the following episode, the main character again indulged in his thoughts. According to them, if he had only started by searching for Baekhyun, if only he had died first. Suddenly, his gaze changed, taking on a somewhat intimidating appearance because his pupil became elongated. Seo Gangram's side turned into a beast. It was even visible behind the covered face, which he hid with his right bloody hand. If he had done that, he would have been fine. That's what the character kept thinking about. The main character was eager to rewind time. The story focused on his closed eyes, which expressed fatigue. Suddenly, a brilliant idea came to his mind. He turned over his right shoulder and looked down somewhere. The following episode informed readers that the regression ability, which belonged to the first divine class, allowed a person to return to the past while retaining their memories, but only the ability cannot be used in case of death. The main character has activated the Stealing Destiny ability. His amber eyes lit up even brighter. The aura around him acquired a radiant light. In the next episode, the story informed readers that the man had received the power of regression. Seo Gangram didn't know where he would return to. He remembered his comrades, Yang Tihun, Yu Heron, who supported him when he was feeling bad at some moments. Then the episode when they fought on the vines appeared in his head. Now the main character has activated his new ability. In his opinion, even if it happens right before his meeting with Bae Yong, he will accept it with a pure soul. It was for this simple and obvious reason that he begged and begged. Suddenly, a golden glow appeared in front of him, and the system informed that the force would be activated any minute. The next moment, the picture focused the reader's attention on the left hand of Seo Gangram. The main character leaned on a table, sitting on a green sofa. He was in a spacious room when he suddenly came to his senses and thought about what was happening. His surprised eyes began to look around and study the objects around him. Suddenly someone greeted him. This character was next to him in order to read his horoscope. The main character raised his head up, which caused his expression to become surprised, rather even discouraged. Both of his hands began to tremble, and the tablet he was holding moved to his forehead, thus hiding his closed eyes. The man said hello. As it turned out, he saw a girl with long dark hair pulled into a low ponytail and green eyes. She crossed her arms over her chest and looked somewhere to the side. In front of her was the silhouette of some stranger waving his hand. However, history did not focus on him. Seo Gangram is back. The story continues its rapid development. This time she tells how the main character was approached by a man who pulled a smile from ear to ear. He had brown hair pulled back. Aloud, he said in a joyful tone that they were finally at their first gathering. Moreover, the stranger hoped to see how well they suited each other. To his left sat a girl with long brown hair pulled into a low ponytail. She pulled away from her neighbor and turned the body in the opposite direction from him. The painting emphasized her face. Close-up readers could see her green eyes, which were directed to the left corner without much interest. In his mind, Seo Gangram made a remark that she was not wearing a bandage. He was watching her from under the planchette, like a child watching a candy. The sunlight illuminated his head, thus giving a cozy and cute look. The guy was really glad to be back. Moreover, the girl sitting in front of him is Shin Soa. She didn't die and didn't lose her eye. Suddenly, the guy removed the tablet, revealing a view of his facial expressions. Seo Gangram replied that it was all like that. Mentally, he came to the conclusion that the man could no longer allow such a thing to happen again. The main character turned to the others in the room and made them understand, indicating that they could write their name, date and time of birth on a white piece of paper handed to them. The stranger pulled a smile from ear to ear again and stretched out his left hand, handing it over. But, as Seo Gangram might have noticed, Shin Soa felt uncomfortable. Apparently, he made such a conclusion because the girl took a deep breath, but this did not prevent her from taking a black pen and writing the required information. The main character refreshed in his memory her image with a black patch on her right eye, at a time when she was dissatisfied with something. In his thoughts, the character reflected on the fact that now that he was thinking about it, she did mention that a little earlier she had to get involved with a strange guy. And the next moment, Seo Gangram wanted to make Shin Soa know about it in advance. In the new episode, the man asked the couple to let him see their compatibility, and those, in turn, sat quietly and watched him. Initially, the story focused readers' attention on a man whose horoscope showed that he belonged to the type of pure gold, which made the man's face shine even brighter. But Shin Soa belonged to the pure tree type. A light aura formed around her, taking on the appearance of trees and plants. She put her left hand on the armrest and listened attentively to the speaker. That's just how the main character said. In the horoscope, this is called a tree felled with gold. The story began to tell how a mysterious faceless man, who held an axe with both hands, was preparing to cut down a tree. It was a terrible compatibility, because edged weapons harmed nature. At this point, CEO Gangram pulled a smile from ear to ear, and showed his clients a tablet with drawings. An innocent aura shone around him. That's just his words really made the man and Shin Soa think. The first one closed his eyebrows, which made his wrinkles better, and the girl just covered her mouth with her hand. The heroine finally entered the dialogue, who shone more than ever and said out loud that everything looked like the truth. She was convinced that they had no choice, for the simple and obvious reason that their compatibility was terrible. After that, the shadow hid her neighbor's face. Apparently, he didn't like the situation that came out the wrong way. He screamed at the top of his voice, asking a question, according to which, what nonsense was the main character saying, referring to the fact that it was complete nonsense. Now he was bursting with rage. Even the aura around him had taken on a terrifying dark hue. The man asked where the owner was. As it turned out, he was right at the table. Seo Gangram raised his right hand, thus indicating himself, and the stranger, in turn, stood on both feet and rested his hands on the table. He was taken by surprise. In the next episode, an ill-mannered guy called out to Shin Soa and in a demanding tone of voice asked her to leave, referring to the fact that her boyfriend could not trust this guy. That's just the girl shone even brighter in her face. She exclaimed that she would like to be told her fate, because she considered Seo Gangram a rather pleasant companion. Suddenly the stranger blushed. He stumbled out to convey to the heroine that she would regret the choice she had made. In his opinion, the reason was obvious. Shin Soa would never be able to meet such a great guy like himself. However, readers could see how her expression became more serious. At the next moment, she made the audacious assumption that it seemed like someone like her had no intentions of dating him, and then she pointed him to the exit. Why, he turned red like a tomato. The man was shaking with anger, and then shouted at the top of his voice that Shin Soa Ryo should come back to him. The stranger disappeared behind the door, ostentatiously slamming it. Even the girl watched him leave. Afterwards, she said that she thought that in places like this, they only mentioned the good things in life. The main character's face took on a somewhat confused look, as if he was hiding something. Seo Gangram raised his eyes, looked up to the right, pursed his lips and mentally came to the conclusion that this was usually the case. Shin Soa turned into a man and made the assumption that her interlocutor was good at it, and then she asked him a question. She was interested in the fact whether she could get a fortune prediction. Subsequently, the girl received a positive response. Suddenly, the main character felt something. It might have seemed as if he had been hit by a charge or that something had come to his mind. Blue energy appeared around him, accompanied by bright sparks of blue and white. In the next episode, the picture described that the room in which Seo Gangram and Shin Soa were located had acquired the same shade. As it became known after a short period of time, the indicators of the main character were calculated based on his fate. Mentally, the man thought that, although he had expected this, there was little he could do about this ringing and dizziness. Seo Gangram grabbed his head and twisted his facial expressions, which caused him to have a painful appearance. Someone asked what he was doing. It was Shin Soa. She screamed at the top of her voice, trying to reach the man in this way so that he would get under the table as soon as possible. The girl knocked on the table with her right hand, and then pulled it. The thought settled in his mind that in his past life, the future head of the Flying Tiger sect had always protected him as well. Only now he needed to concentrate, because hadn't he said a little earlier that he was going to change the future? In the next episode, Seo Gangram and Shin Soa ended up under the table. After some time, the story focused readers' attention on the girl's facial expression. It might have seemed that she was nervous to some extent, because a small drop of sweat rolled down her cheek. She asked a question, according to which she was interested in information, what kind of announcement it was about fate and some indicators. Suddenly, the main character got to his feet and approached the door. When he almost disappeared, the heroine screamed again behind his back, who asked him to wait for her. That's just mentally the guy came to the conclusion that it would be better if he did not contact Shin Soa. He looked around the place, it looks like a cafe, and took a couple of steps forward. Seo Gangram hoped that there was something decent there that could be useful for him to use. He turned his head over his left shoulder when suddenly he found something. From this thought, his expression became several times more cheerful. He then reached out with his right hand, but suddenly Shin Soa appeared behind him, who startled him with her sudden question. The heroine wondered where he was going, but readers may have noticed how the man hid something in the inside pocket of his jacket. The girl grabbed him by the sleeve and dragged him to the side, at the same time saying that they had to evacuate. However, he, in turn, shouted at her to wait. When the couple approached the door, they heard some kind of scream. Suddenly, a group of people formed in front of them, who were plaintively shouting about the approach of monsters, at the same time notifying everyone to flee. Shin Soa stopped and made a surprised face. The picture focused readers' attention on the guy who demanded that the creatures did not approach him and did not touch him. However, before he could react, he was bitten by one of them. The monster bit harder into his leg. When the girl saw this terrible sight, she asked him to wait, because she could not help him. However, she was interrupted by the main character, who made a swinging movement, thanks to which he managed to get rid of the monster, which caused green liquid to pour in different directions. A slight smile appeared on the guy's face, and mentally he made sure of the truthfulness of his assumptions that they were going to appear soon. The narration allowed readers to take a close-up look at these creatures. They looked like giant gray caterpillars with red button eyes, an evil purple aura shone around him. One of the monsters lifted the upper part of the body from bare and opened its mouth. The story informed both the audience and the main character that it was a giant worm, whose rank was awarded to the third class of insects. The creature, although it usually ate grass, but it could also eat animals and people. Seo Gangram shouted an order at the top of his voice for everyone to run to safety. He quickly rushed in the direction from which people and, in fact, giant worms appeared. The man used a small dagger to counterattack. Having made another blow, the main character inflicted a crushing defeat on another monster, after which only green slime remained. The guy fought with giant worms without a shadow of fear, grabbing those by the body with his bare hands. It was as if it was transmitted in space. There was only one left. The guy mentally exclaimed that he was the last. His face expressed rigidity. Seo Gangram furrowed his eyebrows, which made the small wrinkles under the amber-colored eyes more accentuated. His teeth closed, making a snarl. Thus, his facial expressions wore a serious and tense expression. But he was interrupted by someone's screams. Someone behind him was shouting at the top of his voice, calling for help. The main character turned his head over his right shoulder and alerted his gaze, somewhat surprised that there were more monsters there, because it seemed to him that he had coped with all of them. The guy with a rapid speed went behind the wall, from where the noise was heard. He made it clear to the stranger that if he didn't want to die, then he should grab onto something, because these insects weren't that strong. However, when he appeared closer to the source of the screams, the man was pretty much set up. Something caught him by surprise, because readers could see how his expression took on a dumbfounded appearance. His amber-colored eyes froze in surprise, a small drop of sweat rolled over his skin, and his lips were completely closed. After a short period of time, a new episode informed readers about how some girl in a red long skirt was holding a fire extinguisher in both hands. As it turned out, she used it to eliminate the emerging threat in the form of a giant worm. The people surrounding the heroine were watching her closely, and the so-called improvised weapon was covered with green slime. It was Shin Soa. The girl raised her head and pulled a happy smile from ear to ear. She said her thoughts aloud, according to which the monsters did not really seem, because she also managed to defeat one. The surrounding people asked a question in unison, making sure that this fragile Shin Soa had eliminated the giant worm on her own. But the main character, in turn, laughed. He was genuinely happy for the future head of the Flying Tiger sect. Seo Gangram closed his eyes and replied that nothing had happened when the girl asked him about it. As it turned out, the man was betrayed by his own thoughts. A remark rang out in his mind, according to which the main character found it funny to see someone capable of killing dragons rejoicing in something like this. The story focused readers' attention first on Seo Gangram, who addressed a group of people, informing her that the stairs were now free. He pointed at her with his left hand in a gesture for them to start moving in her direction. The man continued talking, trying to convey to them that they would need to get down before more monsters came running. And then the picture wanted the audience to look at Shin Soa, who continued to stand aside and hold a fire extinguisher with both hands. While all the people were trying to reach the stairs at a fast pace, she silently watched them. In the next episode, they thanked the main character and rushed to run as far as possible from a dangerous place that had recently been teeming with creatures. Seo Gangram squatted down and put away his dagger. His bright eyes were relaxed, and in the next moment, the guy gave himself up to his thoughts. As it turned out, in his head he came to the conclusion that while there was an opportunity, he needed to collect the spheres of souls. Next, the guy lowered his hands inside the monster, which caused the green slime, apparently an analog of blood, to come out. That's just the man managed to get small dark balls. Moreover, there were not a couple of them. Of course, they were low level, but it was a little more than Seo Gangram expected to get. The spheres looked somewhat like black pearls shining from the blue light in the room. Suddenly he was interrupted. Shin Soa turned to the main character, asking him a question. After a short period of time, it became clear to readers that the girl was interested in why he did not go down the stairs. She was standing in the middle of the corridor, putting a fire extinguisher next to her, and pointed in the direction of the exit. Such an unexpected appearance took Seo Gangram by surprise. The audience could see this by the surprised expression on his face and a quick wave of his left hand, in which he held the spheres. With this movement, he got rid of the green slime, and a second later put the purchased items in the left pocket of his jacket. The man asked her a counter question. He was curious about the reason why the heroine had not yet evacuated, to which she replied with a convincing tone that she couldn't leave Seo Gangram alone. Shin Soa took a deep breath and looked at her interlocutor. Her green eyes were pronounced against the background of dark skin from the shadow. The girl crossed her arms over her chest and began to listen attentively to the man who at that moment asked her if she was worried about someone she met just today. Apparently, the main character wanted to either distract her with this question or embarrass her. But he didn't succeed, because Shin Soa gave a positive answer in a calm tone of voice. However, Seo Gangram, in turn, continued thinking out loud. In the next episode, he again asked her a question, according to which the girl acted in this way, even if she did not know what else could happen. On its background lay the bodies of the defeated animals, which were on the green slime sprinkling the cold floor, and mentally the man came to the conclusion that his old acquaintance remained the same. He gave her his left hand, but she was about to say something about that being why they should. But they didn't let her finish. Seo Gangram interrupted her by calling her name. The main character mentally decided for himself that for this simple and obvious reason he needed to tell Shin Soa about something. In the next episode, the guy made it clear to her that they had something to talk about. His expression became more serious. Bright amber eyes were clearly visible against the background of dark skin from the shadow. His pupils were like a cat's, as if he was a predator that was hunting for its prey. In the next chapter, the guy turned to his interlocutor because he needed to tell her something. The girl looked at him and asked about what. Seo Gangram said out loud that Shin Soa's name referred to the third dragon stage. However, the girl interrupted him, asked him what he was going to do. The guy kept talking. This time, he replied that her attribute was a tree, and she had abilities with the name Woodleaf Method. A brown sign appeared in front of Shin Soa. Then he asked her if the window of fate had opened. The heroine was surprised because she saw something. The subject showed something about an ability called the Woodleaf Method. Suddenly he asked her if she would fill out the ad they had heard in the room. So it meant that they all received unusual powers. In his head, he was thinking that since they had awakened, they should not die until they met it. The man looked into his phone, turning on the flashlight function. Now Seo Gangram offered to come down. Shin Soa asked him a question, according to which she was interested in what type of fate her interlocutor had. To which he replied that it would be better if they did not tell each other about the contents of their windows of fate, for the reason that others could see it. The girl gave a positive answer. The window of the main character's fate is the same as 5 years ago. It looks like he doesn't have the abilities he stole before his regression. Only one thing looked different. Currently, the guy has accumulated a huge amount of karma. This was probably the result of the theft of the destinies of 421 people. If Seo Gangram wanted to change the future, then he needed to use the Stealing Fate ability, but getting more karma now was dangerous. Karma accumulated when committing serious crimes, like murder or when using special skills. If too much karma accumulated, then the goal went beyond the border. The pair continued to move, and in his head, the man said that everyone who crossed the border suffered. However, Shin Soa replied out loud that they were not alone. A mysterious silhouette of a man fell in front of their eyes. The girl ran in his direction and shouted that they would help them get out of there. However, there was a giant worm behind him, which the main character managed to eliminate. It was lucky that he was the only one here. The easiest way to check whether he is alive or not is to activate the Stealing Fate ability. As it turned out, the current number of people killed was 1. In his head, Seo Gangram was thinking about what looked like they had decent abilities. If they had awakened, they would have been able to survive. The guy decided to use the new power of fire control, earning karma. They were perfect. Moreover, according to the man, they would be useful to him. Suddenly Shin Soa started running, shouting that something was happening. The stranger attacked the giant worms, saying that it was so easy because it was a tutorial. Moreover, he was ready to go out to the boss right now. However, he noticed something. In the next episode, the man was surprised when he saw the survivors. He then asked the characters if there was anyone among them willing to ally with him. It became known that his name was Doc Gajan, but Seo Gangram mentally understood where this guy started from. He introduced himself. The new character asked the heroine's name, to which she also called him. Doc Gajan promised to memorize them, and now that the current event was over, it was going to start soon. However, the main characters did not understand what exactly. The man asked in them if most of the introductions in the games are not based on a certain formula. He belonged to the 3rd divine level, having the attribute of gold and the ability of a dreamer. In any case, as Seo Gangram reflected, Doc Gajan would soon become the leader of one of the 5 great sects. He was capable of such amazing things even before he was awakened. The guy gave them a choice. Either they defeat the boss with allies, or they acquire a strong ally in the middle of the battle. He then patted the protagonist on the shoulder and asked if his awakening power was due to the sacrifice of an ally, which greatly surprised both of them. Seo Gangram knew that the man was a famous web novelist, but he was quite strange. Suddenly, something caught their attention. Someone asked for help. A huge worm of the first class of insects appeared. The stranger slipped and fell. Suddenly, the picture showed Shin Soa's face, who was scared. Doc Gajan then suggested that he was like the boss from the prologue that they had to defeat. Only the girl was convinced that they had to run. The main character joined the battle. He used fire magic that he could definitely rely on. The man asked him if he was sure he could kill the monster. However, I received a negative response. At the moment, they won't be able to handle this creature. Now Seo Gangram has enveloped him in flames, so they didn't let him finish. The worm became more ferocious. The main character shouted for his comrades to run, which they did, and he realized that his attacks would not work. Shin Soa called out to her friend to hurry up to them, but Doc Gajan ordered her not to slow down, grabbing her by the arm. The worm was in front of the main character, ready to make an attacking move. Suddenly, the aura around Seo Gangram acquired a mysterious purple color, like his native magic.